Hey guys and welcome back to my channel. This is part 2 of What If Madara Was in That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and also go and support the author, link in description. The early morning sun spilled across the Jura forest in a cascade of golden light, filtering through the mist-laden canopy and painting the world in a gentle luminescence. The forest awoke with a chorus of birdsong, chirping faintly from hidden perches high above the village that lay nestled within nature's embrace. Amidst this waking symphony, there was an undeniable sense of quiet purpose. Villagers emerged from their homes, casting shadows that mingled with the dappled sunlight as they began their day. Yet Madara remained apart from this harmonious start, choosing solitude by a tranquil stream that wove its way just beyond the protective wooden palisades. He sat cross-legged, his posture still as if carved from stone, beneath a canopy of leaves that whispered secrets in the gentle breeze. Before him lay Shizu's mask, cracked and enigmatic, resting upon a smooth rock polished by years of stubborn stream water. It bore the scars of battle half melted, its edges charred black by Ifrit's fiery malice, yet it held an aura of silent endurance. Madara's eyes remained open, not lost to meditation but anchored in deep contemplation. His gaze was fixed on the mask, on those fractured lines that seemed to tell stories only his heart could hear. Memories surged unbidden, like whispers from ghosts long past. Betrayals and battles fought under similar dawns flooded his mind. The mask was more than just an artifact, it was a fragment of history, a relic imbued with echoes of pain and resilience. His fingers moved delicately over its surface, tracing the jagged contours as though attempting to absorb its truths through touch rather than sight. Each imperfection under his fingertips spoke volumes, rekindling memories both cherished and cursed, memories he wished to unravel like threads in an intricate tapestry. As he traced these lines of history and memory embedded in the mosque's damaged facade, he found himself murmuring with quiet realization. A mask for hiding pain, Madara muttered. How familiar. She clung to it as her last armor, Hagoromo's voice resonated within. As did many, Indra added solemnly. The strong often hide behind symbols. Are we just gonna ignore how creepy you're being with that mask? Asura teased. You look like a brooding poet. Madara's lips thinned, almost forming a rare smile. Quiet. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of pine and morning dew. A single leaf spiraled down, landing beside the mask. Madara didn't flinch. I've worn masks of my own, he said, more to himself than the voices. Power. Vengeance. Righteousness. What did hers hide? He lifted the mask, turning it to catch the light filtering through the canopy. Its fractured surface reflected his eyes, now onyx, now flickering with chakra. The damage had revealed layers beneath the painted exterior, like geological strata of a life lived in shadow. The village stirs, Hagoromo observed. True enough. Beyond the treeline, the sounds of daily life intensified. Hammers striking wood. Children laughing. A life Madara once would have dismissed as naivety, something everyone grows out of as they get older and experience the world. Now. He rose in one fluid motion, tucking the mask inside his robes. The weight of it against his chest felt significant. Not a burden, a reminder. Ranga's voice pierced through the tranquility like a war horn, echoing with an urgency that commanded immediate attention. My lord, we are under attack. 6 powerful beings, ogres, are rampaging through the village. The words struck a deep chord within Madara, each one resonating with the urgency of a clarion call. His hand paused on the mask, fingers curling into a fist of resolve. The village was in peril, and the shadows of his past flashed before him. Battles and betrayals fought beneath different skies but against similar foes. Madara's eyes, still lingering over Shizu's cracked mask under the pale lamplight, now brimmed with determination. The memories it conjured were stark reminders of what he had fought to protect and what had been lost amid flames of vengeance. There was no time for indulgence in reflective melancholy, action was demanded. Without another thought, driven by instinct forged from countless battles, he rose with fluid grace. The mask was clipped to his hip with practiced precision, a relic transformed into a symbol of intent. It hung there, an emblem of past struggles now galvanizing him for the imminent conflict. In an instantaneous motion that belied his silent contemplation moments before, Madara dissolved into a distortion of air, a seamless transition from stillness to kinetic energy. His form became a blur as he embraced the shinobi artistry of movement, disintegrating into swirling eddies that carried him swiftly toward danger. The forest around him responded to his passage, leaves rustling in agitation, branches bending slightly as if bowing to a formidable presence. Each step brought him closer to the unfolding chaos, the village once safeguarded by idyllic peace now under threat from fiercely malevolent forces. Beneath his feet, the earth seemed to pulse with energy as he sped along the invisible pathways between reality and possibility. His mind sharpened, focusing solely on the task at hand, to confront these ogres who dared disturb their tranquil existence. He re-emerged at the village outskirts just as cries of alarm reached crescendo, a symphony of fear mingled with defiance. Villagers scattered like startled birds amidst columns of smoke rising from smoldering remnants. Yet amidst this cacophony stood Madara, calm, unwavering. The once tranquil village square had descended into utter chaos. The cobblestone ground was littered with several goblins and even a few dire wolves, their bodies sprawled in disarray, dazed and wounded from the fierce skirmish. Thick, acrid smoke spiraled upwards from singed wooden structures, the scent of charred timber hanging heavily in the air. Ogre warriors, imposing figures clad in tattered yet regal garments, stood resolute, their wild expressions twisted with fury as they held the defensive line. You monsters dare hide behind a village mask and call yourselves peaceful? Bellowed the imposing figure of a tall, muscular red ogre, his full battle armor gleaming ominously in the flickering light of the fires. We will avenge our people, cried the purple-haired kunoichi, her voice a fierce declaration of intent as she surged forward with blinding speed, her movements a blur against the chaos surrounding her. As Madara emerged from across the chaotic square, a gust of wind followed, seemingly parting the battlefield in his wake. The earth beneath his feet split and cracked, the force of his arrival evident in the rumbling ground. He stood tall and confident, his obsidian kosode billowing in the wind, the Uchiha crest emblazoned on its fabric shining in the fading sunlight. In the midst of chaos, Madara's arrival was like a calm in the storm. His tall figure appeared from the other side of the square, his calm demeanor only adding to his imposing presence. His long, black hair was swept back in the wind, his obsidian kosode billowing behind him like a dark cape. The Uchiha crest, newly embroidered on his chest, glinted in the fading sunlight. His stoic expression remained unchanged as his piercing gaze scanned the chaotic scene before him. The leader of the group, a towering figure with eyes burning like embers, focused his intense gaze on Madara. You! He bellowed, his voice like thunder rolling across the battlefield. The one carrying the Majin's mask. You're taking their side, aren't you? Did you conspire in the ruin of our village, aligning yourself with those who brought about our downfall? His words hung in the acrid air, a challenge cloaked in accusation. Madara cast his gaze downward at the mask that rested against his hip, its battered surface catching glints of firelight. He felt the weight of its history and the bitterness it represented to those around him. A line formed on his forehead as he contemplated the accusation hurled his way. No, he said calmly, his voice cutting through the din of battle, steady and unwavering. But I understand where your misunderstanding lies. Lies. The elder ogre's roar was filled with raw emotion, resonating with years of pent-up grief and anger. His colossal form advanced with deliberate steps, each footfall reverberating across the cobblestones. You dare wear the symbol of our torment and stand here pretending ignorance. Before Madara could respond, a fierce voice pierced through the tension like an arrow shot from a taut bowstring. The purple-haired kunoichi interjected with fervor that matched the elder's rage. Enough talk, she shouted, her eyes narrowing with determination as she dismissed further discourse. He's trying to distract us. Her accusation was swift and decisive. In that instant, she became a streak of motion, a blur of lethal intent aimed directly at Madara. Her speed was astonishing, leaving afterimages in her wake as she closed the distance between them in mere heartbeats. In a blur, Madara sidestepped her dagger and used her own momentum to catch her by the wrist. With a sudden twist, he redirected her into the dirt with a judo throw. She didn't rise again. The big one charged next, sword ablaze with fury. Madara's eyes flared. Fool. With a mere glance, Madara's Mangekyo Sharingan spun. Thr large ogre froze mid-strike, mind seized in a genjutsu. His grip loosened, knees wobbling. You, the elder ogre and their young master stepped in together, attempting a synchronized strike. But Madara's gunbai whirred into a blur of motion, an extension of his will as much as his arm. The elder's blade descended with all the weight of righteous fury behind it, yet the gunbai met it unyieldingly. The sound of steel against reinforced wood was like a thunderclap echoing through the square. Sparks flew, and for a moment, time seemed to stutter. With precise timing, Madara shifted his stance. The elegant fan parried not just one strike but deflected the second blow with a deft spin, catching the blade by its edge and turning its lethal intent into impotence. His feet remained planted, immovable as an ancient tree in the storm, not an inch conceded to overwhelming force. The momentum of the assault rebounded on itself. In a fluid motion, Madara twisted his wrist and drew the gunbai upward in a sweeping arc. It rose with an elegance that belied its destructive power and met the incoming weapon with a force unanticipated by its wielder. The clash reverberated through the air, only for a moment a heartbeat, but then came resolution. The elder's sword met its nemesis in that single swing, the integrity of steel shattered like glass under pressure. The blade exploded into a spray of metallic shards, glittering momentarily in the light before falling like rain upon the cobblestones. Momentum lost, conviction spent, the large ogre staggered backward, disbelief etched across his rugged features. The shattered remnants of his weapon lay scattered at his feet, a testament to Madara's prowess, and realization dawned harshly upon him. His eyes widened in confusion and fear mingled as he looked at what remained of his once proud blade. What hope lingered dwindled swiftly beneath this undeniable display of superior skill. Madara stood unmoved amidst the turmoil he had wrought, serene amidst chaos, a protector undeterred by violence or ferocity. His dark eyes fixed on those who dared to challenge him, they mirrored neither pity nor scorn but simply resolve. Madara exhaled slowly, his voice even. Play time is over. A sudden flare of chakra masked by magicals exploded from his body. A vortex of power pushed outward. The skies above dimmed. Gobta, watching from a rooftop, gulped. We're not even fighting and I feel like I'm gonna die. Ranga bowed his head respectfully in the background. Just before Madara could move again, a voice cut the tension. Please wait. Shuna called. Her eyes were wide. We're sorry. We acted without understanding. But, you must explain yourself. Madara tilted his head, aura still raging. Fine, he said, voice deep and still sharp. You accused me of consorting with Mahjons because of this. He tapped the cracked mask. It belonged to someone recently deceased. Someone whose fate I was not able to change. One looked at the mask with uncertainty. The leader, now free of the genjutsu, blinked rapidly, shaking his head. So, you're not the one who destroyed our home? He asked. Madara replied, no. As I've been trying to say the entire time. The elder's eyes narrowed. Then who are you? Madara stood tall. Madara Uchiha. And you've trespassed in my village. But I am willing to forgive this, once. The moment hung heavy in the clearing as Madara's chakra-laced aura slowly receded, the air thick with silence and the lingering scent of scorched earth. The ogres, weary and no longer compelled by rage, stood tall but uncertain, most now conscious again and silently nursing minor wounds, including the hulking brute whose will had been shattered in genjutsu, and the swift kunoichi, now supported by the older ogre after her humiliating takedown. The priestess took a cautious step forward but halted when her brother raised a hand. Forgive us, the ogre chief spoke first, bowing low. His voice, rich with pride but weighed by recent humiliation, was steady. You are not who we thought you were. That mask, it resembles the one worn by the creatures who destroyed our home. Madara's gaze flickered down to the mask of Shizu still resting at his hip, before returning to the chief with measured calm. I expected as much, he said, voice cold but not hostile. You attacked based on assumption. Something I've seen ruin more than one clan in my time. Xian clenched her fists but said nothing. It was not your appearance, the older ogre added, bowing as well. But the aura we felt when you first emerged. Dark, suffocating, it reminded us of the Mahjong. The Mahjong wore this mask? Madara asked, tilting his head. The chief nodded. Yes. They wore masks like that, monstrous figures. They descended upon us without warning. Not only orcs, but something worse led them. A creature twisted by gluttony, they said. It was devouring ogres alive. Those who resisted vanished beneath its blade or fangs. The woman with violet hair added quietly, only a few of us survived. We scattered. And when we felt the terrible power again, we thought it was one of them returning. Madara's brow furrowed. I see. That explains your desperation. But next time, don't speak over a man when he's explaining your mistake, he said, fixing his gaze pointedly at Xian. She flushed but held her ground. Madara sighed, lifting the edge of his war-tattered cloak and reattaching the mask firmly at his hip. That monster, the one you described. If it is marching toward these lands, then you were right to be worried. But your assumptions were still foolish. The ogre chief stepped forward again, bowing more deeply this time. We accept that. We owe you an apology. We were wrong. You owe me more than an apology, Madara muttered. But I'm not here to claim your heads. Not yet, at least. That prompted a flicker of unease in a few of the ogres. Madara straightened his back and turned to the forest path. I won't ask you to serve me. But if these monsters are as dangerous as you claim, it won't be long before they arrive at my village. Come with me. We'll speak further there. You'll explain everything you know. You would hear us out? The princess asked, genuinely surprised. After all this. Madara didn't turn back to look. I'll tolerate your presence until I decide if you're all worth keeping around. There was a pause before Hekuro gave a subtle smirk. HMPH. A fair offer, considering. The ogres looked to their chief. After a moment's deliberation, he nodded. We accept your terms. Lead the way, Lord Madara. Madara's lips quirked upward just slightly as he began walking toward the village. Behind him, the ogres fell in line. Later that evening, Madara's village. The walk back had been enveloped in a heavy, tense silence. The goblins and direwolves stationed around the village bristled with unease as the formidable group of towering ogres drew near. Their presence was enough to send a shiver down one's spine, muscles taut and ready to spring into action. However, any thoughts of defiance were swiftly quashed by a single, piercing look from Madara. His gaze was a silent command that held the power to quell even the most rebellious spirits, ensuring that the guardians remained disciplined and in check. The ogres lumbered into the heart of the village, their massive frames casting long shadows against the twilight-drenched buildings. They moved with a kind of cautious reverence, their eyes darting from one structure to the next, quietly absorbing every detail of a settlement that had clearly surpassed their expectations. Here, in this pocket of civilization nestled amidst the wilds, was a testament to ingenuity and resilience, a thriving community built by those underestimated by most. The structures rose from the earth with an air of understated grandeur. Though devoid of ornate embellishments, they impressed with their solid construction, each brick placed with purpose, each beam a promise of stability. The goblins and wolves had woven their skills into this tapestry of progress, reflecting a surprising degree of sophistication that even seasoned warriors could not ignore. It was as if these humble creatures had defied nature's odds to carve out a sanctum where none should exist. A rich aroma thickened the air. Smoked meat wafted tantalizingly from pits dug strategically throughout the village. It clung to every breath taken within its domain, wrapping around senses like an invisible shroud that both comforted and beckoned. The scent wove tales of shared meals and communal firesides, where stories were spun as intricately as any web. Peeking from behind sturdy walls were goblin children, their small faces alight with innocent curiosity and wide-eyed wonder. They watched the newcomers with a blend of excitement and trepidation, tiny fingers clutching at folds in wooden doorframes as if for reassurance against such towering strangers. Madara's keen gaze flicked over the ogres whose expressions ranged from thinly veiled astonishment to grudging respect. Their brows furrowed slightly, the weight of new understanding settling across previously rigid perceptions. This was no mere refuge cobbled together in haste but rather an emblem of unexpected advancement. He gestured for the group to follow. You'll be eating here tonight. Try not to scare the children. A short time later, the group found themselves assembled in one of the expansive communal buildings, a structure reminiscent of a mess hall, skillfully crafted with Madara's wood style. The walls bore the intricate patterns of Uchiha symbols, etched with delicate precision into the wood grain. Torches flickered gently, casting a dim orange glow that sent shadows dancing whimsically across the walls. The air was alive with the bustling activity of goblins, who moved swiftly and efficiently, serving platters of succulent roasted meat, hearty stewed roots, and crystal-clear water drawn fresh from a nearby stream. Madara sat at the head of a low table, his arms folded, eyes half-lidded but alert. The ogres sat opposite him, hesitantly at first, but gradually loosening as the warmth of food and fire calmed the tension. The taller woman finally broke the silence, chewing her meat with gusto. This is good. Way better than I expected from a goblin kitchen. A few goblins nearby winced, but Rigard beamed with pride anyway. The ogre chief gave her a flat look. Manners. She pouted but bowed her head slightly. Apologies. Madara didn't look offended. In fact, he was amused. So, you've apologized. You've eaten. Time to speak. Explain what happened in full detail. Not just to me, my people need to understand what kind of threat might be coming. The elder ogre leaned forward, his voice somber. A few weeks ago, our village was thriving. Peaceful. Until the horde came. Orcs, thousands of them, moving with unnatural coordination. Led by a monstrous figure we've come to call the Orc Lord. The Pinkett added, they weren't like normal orcs. These were faster, stronger, smarter. They destroyed everything. We tried to resist, the chief continued. But Imogen appeared. Masked. He summoned creatures of his own, foul and twisted, who fought alongside the orcs. That mask you carry, Lord Madara, resembles theirs. That is why we attacked you. Madara's fingers tapped the table in thought. This Orc Lord sounds like a puppet. The Majin is likely the real danger. The elder's eyes sharpened. You believe so? Madara nodded thoughtfully, a knowing glint in his eyes. Indeed. Orcs don't typically organize or follow orders with such precision on their own. I've encountered this type of behavior before. There's someone orchestrating them, most likely the Majin is pulling their strings. A heavy silence enveloped the room, hanging in the air like a thick fog. Eventually, Madara rose with a purposeful grace. Allow me to be forthright, he declared, his voice carrying a magnetic authority. I am uncertain of how many of your kin have survived, but those present are formidable. Skilled. I have no doubt you possess invaluable capabilities. The ogres straightened, a proud light igniting in their eyes. However, Madara continued, his tone earnest and unwavering, I will not coerce your allegiance. I am not like your adversaries. Should you choose to remain, you will fight alongside us, defending this village until the danger is vanquished. Afterward, you are free to chart your own course. The chief exchanged glances with his kin. You would offer us shelter and stand beside us in this battle. The woman with striking pink hair inquired softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Madara's eyes locked onto hers with unwavering confidence. No, he declared, his voice resonating with an audacious authority. I'll fight this battle. You'll survive because I'll allow it. His words hung in the air, echoing with a commanding presence that sent a shiver through the room, as if the very walls were reacting to his audacity. Sheehan exhaled sharply through her nose, a mix of frustration and reluctant admiration in her eyes. Arrogant. But perhaps not mistaken, the ninja-like ogre mumbled, acknowledging the undeniable strength in Madara's declaration. Madara took a measured sip of his water, the cool liquid providing a brief respite from the weight of the moment. Sleep on it, he suggested, his voice calm yet firm. You're welcome to rest in the guest hall. If you choose to leave in the morning, no one will stop you. But if you stay, his eyes narrowed with a sharp intensity. You'll be under my protection and my command. Without uttering another word, he turned on his heel and strode out of the room, his footsteps echoing softly in the hushed space. The ogres remained behind, their massive forms looming in the quiet atmosphere. This time, the silence was not just an absence of sound but a deep, contemplative stillness, as if the very air itself was pondering the weight of Madara's words. The next morning, the sun inched its way over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, and casting elongated shadows across the land. Madara stood tall, a solitary figure amidst the slowly awakening world, before the 7 ogres who now knelt with a quiet and solemn resolve. The morning air was crisp and invigorating, carrying the scent of earth and dew, while the ground beneath remained cool and slightly damp from the night's lingering moisture. Beyond the ogres, a gathering of goblins and direwolves maintained a respectful distance, their eyes fixed on the scene unfolding before them, observing in an almost reverent silence. Madara folded his arms across his chest, his eyes narrowing as he scrutinized the red-haired leader with an intense focus. The young man's body was a tapestry of scratches and bruises, remnants of their recent clash, yet these marks of battle had done nothing to diminish the unwavering determination reflected in his steely gaze. He reminds me of myself, Madara mused, a flicker of recognition sparking in his eyes. It wasn't in sheer power though the potential lay dormant, like a coiled serpent ready to strike, but in the way the young ogre bore the heavy mantle of leadership with quiet dignity. A once noble clan, diminished from hundreds to a mere 6, yet the fire in his gaze blazed undiminished, a testament to his indomitable spirit. He had made the difficult choice of survival, swallowing the bitter pill of pride to safeguard those who remained. In this, he mirrored the Madara of old, the one who had guided the Uchiha through relentless wars and ceaseless turmoil. You chose to protect what you had left, even when it meant humbling yourself. I know that pain all too well. Images of the Uchiha clan flashed through his mind, his brothers, his father, the blood-soaked earth of countless battlefields. The Uchiha had endured longer, but their demise was no less tragic. And this young ogre, though in the spring of his life, had trod the same arduous path. There was something profoundly admirable in that shared journey. The crimson-skinned ogre leader advanced, his hand resting confidently on the hilt of his gleaming katana. His skin glowed in the dim light, a vivid contrast to the shadows that danced around him. Though still maintaining a sense of wariness, his posture had shifted significantly, no longer aggressive, but instead composed and resolute. His broad shoulders were relaxed, a subtle indication of the decision he had reached. The battle that had unfolded before him had revealed all the answers he needed, solidifying his understanding and purpose. We've come to our decision, he said at last, voice steady despite the ache in his ribs. We are not your subordinates, but we are not fools either. We've seen your strength, felt it. And we know what waits in the marsh. He paused, glancing back at the others. The ogre's princess gave a slight nod. The old elder closed his eyes in quiet agreement. One by one, the ogres gave their assent, warriors who, just hours ago, would never have imagined kneeling to anyone. The leader exhaled through his nose and dropped to one knee. Not as a servant. Not as a defeated man. But as a warrior acknowledging another. We accept your proposal, Uchiha Madara, he said. Until the orc threat is dealt with, we fight together. The others followed, kneeling not in submission, but in solemn unity. We do this not for pride, or honor, the elder added. But because we believe you might be the one who can stop the flood before it drowns us all. Madara stood still, his expression unreadable beneath the flicker of firelight. His rinnegan glinted faintly, unreadable as ever. Then he stepped forward. Temporary or not, he said, his voice calm and absolute, I do not form alliances lightly. You've chosen the path of survival and for that, you'll have my strength. A beat passed. But know this, I do not protect those who hesitate. If you falter in battle, I will not wait for you to catch up. The ogre leader smirked faintly. Then we'll be sure to keep up. Madara's gaze lingered on the sky for a moment, then he turned back to face them. Madara took a breath, stepping forward. You, he said, voice steady. From this day forth, you are Benimaru. A surge of searing light and magic exploded from the young warrior's body. His crimson hair deepened in color, his muscles tightened with demonic refinement, and black and red armor materialized across his body with jagged lines of enchantment. He staggered slightly, caught in the storm of power rushing through him. Madara didn't pause. He raised a hand toward the pink-haired girl in priestess garb, composed yet clearly filled with worry for her comrades. Shuna. Holy radiance spiraled upward around her as her robes were transfigured into ceremonial finery embroidered in glowing thread. Her beauty seemed to shimmer with sacred energy, and she placed a delicate hand over her chest in thanks. The next was the mountain of muscle, the stoic black-bearded ogre with a hammer slung on his back. Kurobe. The transformation struck like a thunderclap. His body swelled, veins pulsing with mana. His hammer became a masterpiece, etched with rune lines that glowed a faint orange, while thick smith's gloves and armor formed around his arms and chest. He exhaled a cloud of smoke and smiled. One by one, Madara continued. To the voluptuous violet-haired swordswoman, Shion. To the quiet, blue-haired shinobi, Soe. To the scarred, old warrior with ancient grace, Hikuro. Each time he spoke, energy drained from him but his expression never faltered. Not even as the final name left his lips and darkness finally claimed him. His body slumped forward mid-step, and Hikuro lunged to catch him. Gasps echoed through the crowd. Shuna immediately moved to Madara's side, checking his breathing. His chakra and magicules were wildly unstable but recovering. He was unconscious but alive. Shion stood with her arms crossed, a low sigh leaving her lips. He gave us his strength. Without hesitation. It's like what he did for the goblins, Soe muttered. But this time, it hit him harder. Ranga slowly padded over and lay beside Madara protectively. He'll wake. He always does. The Kijin stood silently around their fallen benefactor, understanding just how much he had offered them and how heavy that burden truly was. 16 hours later. Madara's eyelids fluttered open, revealing the dimly lit confines of the chieftain's lodge. The room was steeped in the comforting embrace of twilight, the sun descending beyond the horizon and casting an ethereal glow that bathed everything in shades of amber and gold. His senses gradually came into focus, each one sharpening as if taking stock of his surroundings, the rich aroma of aged wood mingling with the subtle fragrance of hanging herbs, while a distant, savory scent teased his appetite, stirring from somewhere below. He moved cautiously, aware of every ache and fatigue lingering in his bones, a reminder of the monumental power he had unleashed hours earlier. His muscles protested as he propped himself up on an elbow, feeling like a man who had spent a lifetime in battle rather than a mere 16 hours in repose. He was momentarily disoriented by the weight of exhaustion heavy on his limbs, yet clarity began to return with each steady breath. In that stillness, he sensed the room wasn't empty. It thrummed with traces of life pulsating beyond its wooden walls. He could feel them, his new allies, their presence faint but palpable at this distance. Despite their unorthodox beginnings, they were united now under a shared cause, survival. As he swung his legs over the side of the bed, Madara paused to gather his thoughts. The memories came rushing back, those moments when he had bestowed new identities upon the ogres, transforming them into Kijin with only a word and his vast reserves of power. Each name carried significance. They'd not only gained strength but purpose, becoming something greater beyond their past selves. The act had left him drained, yet it stirred within him an unexpected warmth, a kindred sense of camaraderie forged in shadows and firelight. It wasn't mere benevolence that drove him, rather it was an understanding born from experience etched into his soul, a desire to guide those who might stand beside him against whatever adversities loomed ahead. A sudden surge of energy pulsed through his veins then, resurgent chakra stabilizing with reassuring force as if affirming Madara's resolve to continue this path he'd chosen, to forge alliances out of necessity and kinship alike. As he sat there inhaling deeply from lungs now free to breathe freely again after endless battles fought both external and internal alike, it felt different somehow, not triumph alone but acceptance that even though destiny hadn't been kind thus far, it hadn't completely denied him either. It merely demanded adaptation when faced anew with challenges unforeseen before, now known only through echoes past, hauntingly familiar yet distant nightmares replayed time and again inside restless slumber. And amidst all this introspection came Ranga's voice, soft yet resonant, whispering gently across psychic waves as if spoken directly into Madara's mind. Welcome back, Lord Madara. They've all been waiting. Madara's consciousness slowly clawed its way up from the depths of slumber, each second a labored ascent from the abyss of fatigue that clung desperately to him. Threads of awareness unraveled the heavy fog obscuring his thoughts, awakening him gradually to his surroundings. His body hummed under the aftereffects of immense chakra expenditure, muscles twitching as if remembering the rush of energy that had coursed through them in an almost sacred rite. The memory of naming 6 powerful beings surged to the forefront of his mind, a monumental act akin to casting seeds across fertile soil, watching them take root and blossom into something formidable. That surge had left his veins tingling with remnants of power, both spent and retained. As his eyes opened, he was greeted by a ceiling crafted from smooth wood, the surface unmarred by imperfections, a testament to skilled hands that had shaped it with care. The air around him was redolent with faint incense, its aroma curled gently through the room like ghostly fingers, lingering as a soothing balm against the aches etched deep within his frame. A warmth enveloped him, a blanket draped over his form, meticulous attention evident in its careful arrangement. It spoke volumes, testament to unseen hands that had tended to him during those lost hours of unconsciousness. He wondered who had taken such care, one of the Kijin perhaps. Their gratitude for the strength he'd bestowed not merely in words but through gestures as well. His senses attuned further as he lay there, acknowledging each physical sensation, the gentle chill against his skin where it met cool air, contrasting with comforting warmth beneath layers intended solely for rest and recuperation. This semblance of peace felt fragile yet precious amidst an existence fraught with turmoil and ceaseless conflict, a rare interlude carved out amidst chaos. Stretching outward from this cocoon of cloth and calmness came faint sounds, hushed whispers on peripheral edges, life continuing beyond these four walls. Allies preparing themselves for new challenges ahead while he recovered here in solitude, born not from abandonment but respect duly earned by deeds rendered selflessly unto them. His thoughts coalesced into clarity once more as memories resurfaced, moments when he'd transformed ordinary beings into extraordinary warriors destined now for battles shared in unison alongside him, a bond forged stronger than steel, tempered under fire's relentless embrace, each name spoken imbuing purpose beyond what lay before their eyes alone. Despite exhaustion's vestiges clinging still at periphery's edge like shadows refusing dissipation entirely, even when confronted by dawn's encroaching light, Madara found himself feeling something unexpected, a quiet sense belonging interwoven among disparate souls gathered together upon paths converged unexpectedly yet unmistakably towards singular destiny that beckoned irresistibly onward, ever towards unknown horizons filled uncertainty aplenty yet captivating, nonetheless irresistible allure calling forth spirit unyielding, resolute, indomitable. 16 hours, Hagoromo's voice rumbled calmly inside his mind. Could have been worse, Asura muttered. At least you didn't knock yourself out for days again. Indra chuckled dryly. The door to the room creaked open. Lord Madara. A soft voice called. Pink-haired, delicate but radiant, the young woman he remembered as the princess entered holding a bowl of steaming stew. Her new form shimmered with spiritual elegance, long, flowing robes embroidered with lotus motifs, her horns now smaller and polished. Her beauty had become divine. You're awake, she said with an audible breath of relief. Thank the spirits. Behind her stormed in the towering purple-haired warrior woman. She had clearly also undergone an awakening, the bulk of her muscle denser, the cut of her armor more fitting to her new, voluptuous yet lethal frame. You should have called me first, Shuna, she huffed, brushing past the princess and setting down a stack of folded black robes. I was going to bring him fresh clothes. I thought food might be more appropriate, Shuna replied sweetly, her eyes narrowing just slightly. Madara blinked slowly. You've all changed. The heavy-footed male warrior with red hair soon entered, followed by the ninja-like man in sleek black armor. The older elder walked in behind them, his beard now streaked with faint silver and a new glow to his eyes. Indeed, the red-haired leader bowed deeply. Thanks to your naming, we have evolved. We are no longer mere ogres. We are now, Kijin. You honored us beyond what we could have imagined, Lord Madara. Kurobe, now looking like a regular albeit nearly 7 foot and powerfully built behemoth, ducked into the room last. He bowed so low his forehead almost hit the floor. You're still alive. That's good, Madara muttered, reclining back on the bed slightly. I had hoped my efforts weren't wasted. No, Lord Madara, Hikuro said, clasping his hands. We owe you everything. Our power, our future. I don't have words for our gratitude. Then don't waste them, Madara replied, sitting fully upright. Use that strength to make sure you never fall again. That would be thanks enough. The Kijin all bowed again save the ninja-like one, who gave a sharp, silent nod. As Shuna approached with the stew, Shion beat her to the bedside, snatching the bowl from her hands. I'll feed him, she declared, kneeling by Madara with sparkles in her eyes. Open up, Lord Madara tilde. I'm fully capable of feeding myself, he replied, eyebrow twitching. I insist tilde. Shuna forced a smile, her tone honeyed yet pointed. If Lord Madara doesn't want to be babied, perhaps we shouldn't insist on smothering him. I'm not smothering him. I'm tending to my lord. Unlike some people who only know how to sew and sweep. At least I don't break through doors and walls like a charging ox. Ladies, Madara said flatly. Both women froze, then turned and gave perfectly synchronized smiles. Yes, Lord Madara. Set the bowl down. That was almost nostalgic, Hagoromo muttered. Shion eventually handed him the bowl, her cheeks slightly puffed. Shuna knelt respectfully nearby, adjusting her posture to maintain the high ground and grace. The others remained standing. The red-haired male stepped forward again. If I may we know the names you gave us? We would be honored to bear them properly. Madara set the empty bowl aside and stood, stretching his limbs as his chakra steadily normalized. He regarded each of them carefully, recalling the thoughts that had passed through his mind during the naming. You, he pointed to the red-haired leader, or Benimaru. The crimson fire of your people, now tempered with wisdom. Hold that fire tightly. Benimaru placed his fist to his chest, eyes firm. Yes, Lord Madara. To you, he nodded to the graceful princess, I gave the name Shuna. A name of calmness. Keep your heart steady, even when others lose theirs. Shuna bowed low with both hands at her waist. I will honor it. He turned to the older one. Hikuro. The one who remembers. Teach them what must not be forgotten. Hikuro's eyes gleamed. As you command. Madara's eyes flicked to Kurobe. Kurobe thanks you, Kurobe thundered with surprising softness. To the quiet one, he pointed at the shinobi-style Kijin, I gave the name Soe. The silent blade swift, sure, and loyal. Soe gave a short nod, his expression unreadable. Finally, his gaze returned to the violet-haired woman, who was practically sparkling in anticipation. And you, he muttered, narrowing his eyes. Her excitement surged. Yes. Shion. You're loud. She beamed. That's perfect. Madara blinked. You don't even care what it means, do you? Nope. And once again, the voices in his mind were there, an ever-present headache offering commentary on his decisions. The sage Hagoromo's amused snort resonated like a low rumble in Madara's psyche, a sound both familiar and mildly exasperating. As always, Hagoromo's insights were not entirely unwarranted. They often cut through the noise with clarity and levity, albeit laced with playful mockery. His ancient wisdom was a constant companion, guiding Madara through the labyrinthine paths of leadership and legacy. Naming her Shion, he said aloud to himself, recalling the moment of inspiration behind her name, a whirlwind of energy wrapped in unparalleled enthusiasm. Surely, he had anticipated some challenges by bestowing such a lively spirit with a name. Was it a momentary lapse of judgment or a deliberate choice to inject vibrancy into their midst? Perhaps both. Indra's dry remark echoed next, even more sardonic than usual. His voice held an edge typical of the fierce brother who seldom missed an opportunity to critique with sharp-tongued honesty. Naming someone like her, what were you expecting? Indra's jest was a subtle jab that struck precisely where intended, leaving Madara caught between amusement and slight irritation. Asura quickly defended her, saying, I don't know, I think it adds to her personality. What's wrong with having a bit of energy? The mental banter played out against the backdrop of his surroundings, each comment met with a series of raised eyebrows from the Kijin, who could only wonder at Madara's sudden expression changes. He shifted slightly on the bed as he considered the implications of their teasing remarks. Flickers of nostalgia colored his thoughts, flashes of time spent under starry skies contemplating choices once made in earnest, youth now revisited through wiser eyes. Perhaps there was something endearing about Shion's exuberance, after all, a reflection of battles fought not just with swords but also amidst clashing wills tempered into harmony over time. In this newfound sense of belonging among his loyal followers lay echoes reminiscent yet distinct from those first formative days back in Konohagakure, a village built strongly upon ideals he'd nurtured alongside cherished friends long since gone. Madara let out a sigh, almost smiling. The sun cast golden light through the canopy of Jura's trees, dappling the training field in soft warmth. The clash of wood against wood echoed through the forest clearing as the newly evolved goblins and Kijin sparred under the sharp eye of their instructor. Watch your center of gravity, Hikuro barked, the seasoned Kijin master correcting a young goblin's stance with a firm tap of his sheathed blade. If your hips aren't rooted, your sword becomes weightless. Yes, Master Hikuro. The goblin responded with a deep bow, sweat dripping down his forehead. Madara sat cross-legged atop a short outcrop of stone, arms loosely folded, his obsidian kosode fluttering slightly in the breeze. His new gunbai rested against his shoulder, and his hair glinted in the sun like polished onyx. Beside him stood Shion, arms crossed in her usual bold posture, eyes narrowed in approval at the drills. These goblins have promise, she commented. Especially that one, look how fast he learns. Madara scrutinized the scene unfolding below, his Rinnegan focusing with an intensity that bordered on supernatural. He observed every subtle shift in the trainees' energy, the invisible currents of chakra that pulsed through them like lifeblood. The goblins and Kijin moved in concert, their synchronized motions a testament to Hikuro's relentless training regimen. Each swing of the wooden swords and every pivot on their heels spoke of a burgeoning potential raw and untamed, yet inching closer toward refinement. Hikuro is crafting them well, Madara remarked quietly, his voice barely rising above the rhythmic clatter of practice weapons meeting in midair. A sword in undisciplined hands is nothing but dead weight, it takes discipline to give it meaning. Shion stood at his side, her presence as usual pervading the space with a mix of boisterous energy and shifting gravity, a duality that was uniquely hers. Her gaze softened unexpectedly as she regarded him, allowing a momentary vulnerability to slip past her otherwise spirited demeanor. It's because of you, she murmured, her tone imbued with a rare gentleness that contrasted starkly against her usual bravado. You gave them this opportunity, they're learning because of you. Madara opened his mouth to respond, to downplay his role, but before he could shape his thoughts into words, a subtle disturbance caught both their attentions, a rustling sound from the shadows behind him. He shifted slightly, senses sharpening as he identified the source. From the dense shadows that clung to the trees like whispered secrets, Soe materialized a specter of silent intent. Without a sound, he emerged from the darkness, moving with a fluid grace that spoke of years spent honing stealth to an art. He settled into a kneeling position, his fist firmly planted on the earth as if chiseling his presence into reality. The gentle sway of his cerulean hair mirrored the silent currents of wind that swept through the grove. His voice, though soft, carried the weight of urgency. Lord Madara, he began, each syllable measured and clear against the backdrop of rustling leaves. A dryad requests an audience with you. Madara's eyes flickered with a hint of curiosity at this unexpected revelation. A dryad. His inquiry was tinged with a rare note of intrigue. The mention of such mystical beings stirred memories, legends of nature spirits intertwined with the forest's ancient roots. Soe confirmed with a solemn nod, undeterred by the significance of his message. She identifies herself as trainee, he said, his tone unwavering. She appeared just beyond our northern border, accompanied by a subtle yet unmistakable magical signature. She stands alone. The information hung in the air, weaving itself into the tapestry of uncertainty that already shrouded their world. The presence of a dryad held implications, a call from nature itself that could not be ignored nor taken lightly. Madara paused for a fraction longer than usual, allowing the news to settle into his consciousness like stones dropped into still water, causing ripples to expand ever outwards. His mind raced through possibilities, considering what might drive such an ethereal creature from her woodland home to seek him out so directly. His calculations completed in moments, assessing potential risks and benefits with an efficiency born from countless battles fought across time itself, he finally rose fluidly from his seated position atop basalt rock like emerging shadow given form under sunlight's scrutiny. Madara stood, brushing imaginary dust from his sleeve. Did she declare her purpose? She said only that it is urgent and concerns the forest itself. Shion tilted her head. Do you know her? I've only heard of dryads in legend, Madara replied, voice low. Spirits bound to ancient forests, guardians of equilibrium. If she's reaching out, something must be threatening the balance of this land. Shion frowned. Should I call the others? No. If she came alone, she likely doesn't mean harm, he said. Then added, still, I'll gauge that for myself. The breeze grew cooler as Madara approached the glade at the edge of the village, the grass parting under his steps as if recognizing something divine. The clearing itself was bathed in serene light, birds momentarily silenced, nature collectively holding its breath. There, standing in the middle of the field, was a woman unlike any other. Her entire form exuded a faint, ethereal glow, enveloped in a soft emerald hue that seemed to emanate from her very being. Her skin, reminiscent of fresh spring leaves, had a gentle, verdant vibrancy that spoke of life and renewal. Cascading down her back were long, vine-like tendrils of hair, curling and twisting as if they were alive, each strand intricately interwoven with delicate blossoms. These flowers shimmered with a subtle luminescence, like tiny stars caught in the twilight, their petals capturing and reflecting light in a dance of ethereal beauty. Her eyes, ancient and deeply piercing, were twin pools of glowing jade, holding within them the mysteries of ages past. Her presence was profound and commanding, radiating an almost holy reverence that filled the air with a serene, awe-inspiring energy. Trainee, I presume, Madara said, stepping into the light. The dryad turned slowly, her expression serene, though edged with concern. She observed Madara for several silent moments before giving a graceful bow, her form flowing like a willow in wind. You are the one called Madara, she said, her voice like wind through leaves, soft, melodic, but resonant with power. Guardian of this forest's trembling heart. Madara raised a brow. Trembling heart. A sudden intensity filled Trainee's gaze, akin to storm-laden skies. She glided forward, each step purposeful and laden with the weight of her message, her presence commanding the very ground beneath her feet to heed the urgency in her tone. A tremor, she began, her voice a symphony of anxiety and resolve, shakes the very soul of Jura. You must understand it's more than just a forest disturbance. It is as if the very arteries of this land throb with impending doom. Her words pierced the tranquil air, filling it with a tension that mirrored her own distressed energy. A monstrous devourer has awakened, she pressed on, her voice rising like an unstoppable wave crashing against stone cliffs. This creature is not mere legend or shadow, it is real and ravenous, consuming every trace of life in its relentless path of destruction. Her eyes flickered briefly with sorrow, a delicate memory echoing in their depths as she continued, my sister has already succumbed to this insidious darkness, ensnared and devoured before she could even cry for aid. The palpable grief intertwined with her words rendered them heavy with emotion, each syllable weighted by the enormity of loss. Yet beneath the anguish lay simmering determination, a will forged from centuries spent safeguarding the forest. And if its rampage persists, Trainee warned, sweeping an arm towards the horizon where trees met sky in a distant embrace, this forest and your village within its protective bounds will certainly face obliteration. It is not just the trees and creatures at risk, it's the very essence of life that binds us all. Her plea hung suspended in the silence that followed, like dew clinging to leaves before dawn's light dispels it, a call to arms steeped in urgency and desperation. In that moment, Madara realized she sought more than his intervention, she sought an ally who could turn back tides of ruin. Sheehan bristled behind him. You could have led with that. Trainee's eyes did not shift. There is no time to cushion warnings. A calamity approaches. I came not to threaten, but to plead. Adas, Madara Uchiha. The forest needs your strength. Soe, silent behind a tree, subtly tilted his head. Her aura is pure, but her desperation is real. Madara gave a short exhale, thoughtful. You said your sister has fallen. What happened to her? Trainee's serene mask faltered. She was consumed by an endless swarm. Orcs, tens of thousands, united under something monstrous. A new being. One who commands hunger itself. Madara's gaze sharpened, the familiar resolve of a battle-hardened warrior resurfacing within him as he comprehended the gravity of Trainee's revelation. His mind sifted through the jumble of warnings he had received about the orc menace, recalling the tales from the ogres whose eyes spoke volumes of their fear and desperation. The memories returned vividly, the crude banners of war, the relentless advance on peaceful lands, and the cries that echoed through the night like haunting specters. Ah, these are precisely the orcs, Madara stated, his voice cutting through the tension like a well-honed blade, those very fiends against whom the ogres issued grave cautions. Beside him, Xian's demeanor shifted, no longer merely bold but tinged with an undercurrent of genuine worry. Her brows knitted together in an expression that mingled both fear and anticipation. If they're already delving deeper into Jura's heartland, she began, her voice trailing off as she turned to face him fully. It was as if her very spirit quivered at the thought of such encroaching darkness threatening to smother their fragile peace. Madara interrupted, not unkindly but with authority that brooked no contradiction. They will inevitably arrive, he declared, each word infused with a resolve as cold and unyielding as iron. His eyes gleamed with a fierce determination unique to those accustomed to commanding legions and shaping kingdoms. And I shall not permit another ruin to establish itself beneath my dominion. His declaration was more than mere words, it was a vow etched into the marrow of reality itself, a promise born from his past failures and present convictions. The air seemed to crackle around him, an invisible force acknowledging his command over fate itself. Trainee looked up, hope now visible in her eyes. Then you will help. Madara nodded once. I will. But I expect more than cryptic warnings, Dryad. You'll tell me everything, names, movements, locations. Trainee bowed her head. Of course. I will share all that I know. But I must ask, for the sake of the forest, move quickly. A being that commands hunger. Indra mused from within. Sounds like an Orochimaru knockoff, Asura scoffed. More likely a pawn of someone deeper, Hagoromo added grimly. Madara turned back toward the village. Call the others. We begin planning tonight. The war room was dim but alive with urgency. A wide wooden table stood at its center, strewn with hand-drawn maps of the Jura forest, charcoal markers indicating camps, pathways, rivers, and now enemy movement. Madara sat at the head, arms folded, eyes half-lidded as he absorbed everything Trainee had revealed. At his right was Rigard, eyes flicking nervously between the map and his notes. On his left, Kaijin nursed a stone mug of dark brew, brows furrowed in thought. Seated along the sides were Benimaru, Shuna, Hikuro, Soe, and Shion. Ranga lay coiled protectively near the back wall, his silver-blue eyes tracking every movement. Gobta sat beside him, legs swinging off his chair, biting his nails. Kaijin slammed his mug down. 200,000. That number can't be right. It is, Madara replied flatly. It's suicide, Garm said, voice like a gravel slide. Even in our heyday, we would have been swept under by a wave like that. Hikuro nodded grimly. And they grow stronger as they consume. The more they kill, the more they evolve. That's not an army, it's a spreading disease. Shuna leaned forward, worry tinging her voice. Trainee said they are united under a single orc lord, yes. That would explain their sudden coordination. And if he has awakened into a demon lord, added Kaijin, we're dealing with something far worse than a swarm. We're dealing with a general of catastrophe. The tension in the room felt like a living entity, wrapping itself around each individual, squeezing breaths into shallow gasps. All eyes were on Madara, their collective gaze a tapestry of anticipation and doubt. He appeared impervious to the rising panic, a lone mountain against a stormy sea. His demeanor, far from reflecting the anxiety that laced the air like an invisible fog, remained an unyielding sanctuary of calm. If his mind harbored any traces of apprehension, he concealed them beneath layers of steely composure. His expression was inscrutable as he processed the information shared by Trainee and weighed it against his own experience, a lifetime forged in blood and fire, challenging mortal limits. Silence lingered like smoke after a wildfire, before Madara finally broke it with words as solid as granite. I understand your concern, he acknowledged, his voice imbued with a tranquil power that belied the gravity of their situation. Each word resonated like a bell tolling in the gloom, steady and unwavering. This isn't a minor threat. But, he paused deliberately, allowing his measured confidence to settle over them like an incantation designed to soothe their frayed nerves. You really shouldn't be so disturbed, he continued, the faintest hint of amusement curling at the edges of his mouth, a whisper of dry humor barely perceptible but undeniably there. Take my indifference as a hint. His gaze swept over them with measured assurance, pinning each one in place with its intensity. We're fine. The ripple of confusion that passed through the gathering was almost tangible, stirring unease among those unaccustomed to such nonchalance in the face of impending peril. Rigard's face twitched involuntarily, an honest betrayal of his inner turmoil. Forgive me, Lord Madara, he ventured cautiously, trying to reconcile his leader's apparent lack of alarm with the grim reality before them. But, you seem far too composed. This isn't a mere bandit raid, this is an army of monsters who devour and grow. Madara received Rigard's plea with patience honed from years spent navigating both allies' fears and enemies' threats. Behind his impassive exterior lay a strategist's mind, dissecting all variables, assessing every option like pieces on a shogi board and finding no reason for despair. His response came not from arrogance but experience, the kind earned through trials no ordinary soldier could fathom, battles fought beyond the realm where others dared tread. I've fought armies before, Madara replied evenly, allowing the weight of past victories to underscore his words. Not just numbering in the thousands. Not even tens of thousands. I once stood on a battlefield where corpses formed the terrain and rivers of blood carved paths through valleys. Certainly, the shadows of uncertainty marred the assembly, yet within Madara's thoughts, his ancient companions found a peculiar camaraderie. Indra's voice reverberated with a mischievous thrill, urging Madara to regale the room with tales of bygone dominance. Tell them about the time you dropped a meteor, wiping out an entire army division, he he suggested, laughter bubbling beneath his words like a spring unearthed. Hagoromo's counsel came softer, tempered by wisdom as time worn as the winds eroding mountaintops. Don't scare them to death just yet, he interjected with a serenity that balanced Indra's zeal. Still, he knew too well how fear could freeze hearts and unravel resolve that had taken years to weave. Asura's thoughts danced with a strategist's flair for theatrics, dismissing reticence in favor of a more suspenseful approach. Let them doubt, he remarked in Madara's mindscape, his tone imbued with the playful arrogance of one who has seen victory plucked from chaos time and again. It makes victory more dramatic. Within this internal dialogue, Madara found solace, a reminder that even amidst uncertainty and discord, his past companions still provided counsel from beyond. Their voices intertwined like threads in a tapestry only he could perceive. Drawing himself back into the present, Madara observed his companions seated around him, their eyes fixed upon him with bated breath akin to leaves waiting for dawn's light to dispel lingering shadows. Each one hoped to glean strength from his conviction, each sought a sliver of assurance that their cause was not lost before it began. Breaking the tension with deliberate calmness, Madara spoke once more, his words imbued with authority and certainty born from untold battles. I have walked among death, he declared, allowing the memories of those ancient martial triumphs to suffuse his tone with unyielding confidence. Waded through it like mist. As he spoke, a subtle glow emanated from his Rinnegan, a testament not only to power but also to experience etched deep within him like runes on an aged scroll. So believe me when I say our side will win. I and a small team of elites will go out and eradicate the threat. A heavy silence followed his words, broken only by the crackling of torches along the wall. Hikuro cleared his throat. Forgive me, Lord Madara, but even if your strength exceeds anything we've seen, surely there's wisdom in leading an army, not just a few elites. Benimaru crossed his arms. I agree. If we're outnumbered 1,000 to 1, even you must reach a limit. Madara's gaze shifted to them, calm yet burning. And what happens to our people, our village, our children, if we lead them into that meat grinder? No, I won't risk needless lives when I can end this with precision. You really think that's possible? Kaijin asked, skeptical but curious. Yes, Madara answered without hesitation. For me at least. You all will not be rushing in. I'll need time to dismantle them piece by piece, to draw out the demon lord. So, no direct assault for us. Soe finally spoke, eyes cold and calculating. Not until we know where their command structure lies. And not until I've gauged the full extent of their evolution. Xian raised an eyebrow. Then, what do you propose? Madara leaned forward, fingers lightly tapping the map. We strengthen our front lines, build outposts, and place watch units to monitor the horde's movement. We let the orcs spread but only where we want them to. A trap. Then when the moment is right, I and a hand-picked strike force will break their command. Madara said. But with only those I deem capable of surviving. Any more is a risk. Gobta raised a timid hand. So, not me, right? Not even close, Kaijin said flatly. Madara offered a rare smile. You will have an important job, Gobta, carrying out supplies. Gobta blinked. That, actually sounds really important. He's too proud of that, Indra muttered. At least he's enthusiastic, Hagoromo added with a faint laugh. Benimaru stood slowly, his crimson hair catching the firelight. If you'll have me, I'll join this force. As will I, Xian added immediately. Soe gave a short nod. It's my duty. Shuna hesitated. I will stay and tend the village. Madara looked over them, pride and somber responsibility mixing in his gaze. Good. Then it's settled. We prepare, we observe, and then we strike with absolute force. Kaijin nodded at last. You're a madman, but damn if I don't believe you'll pull it off. Rigurd leaned back, visibly relieved. Then may the heavens favor your blade, Lord Madara. Madara's voice was cool as steel. They already do. A few days after trainees' visit and the war council, the village bustled with preparation. Training intensified, stockpiles grew, and weapons were forged. The atmosphere remained serious until a stir swept across the village as unfamiliar figures approached the gate. At the entrance stood a flamboyant lizardman riding a raptor-like creature. Behind him, a small group of similarly scaled warriors stood tall, their polished armor glinting in the sun. Gobta came sprinting toward Madara and the Kijin who had been overseeing construction details. Lord Madara. He panted, saluting. There's a lizard man at the gate claiming he's some sort of envoy. Madara raised a brow and turned to the others. Shuna, Shion, come with me. Benimaru, oversee the rest. Ranga, stay alert in the shadows. The group made their way to the front, where Rigurd was already nervously bowing to the self-declared envoy. I am Gabiru, the lizardman announced, flipping his purple ponytail dramatically. The proud son of the lizardman chieftain, heir to the Great Swamp, future king of the Jura forest. Madara's expression didn't shift. You're here as an envoy. Gabiru placed a clawed hand on his chest. Indeed. My father saw it fit to extend diplomatic contact. I come bearing word of the gathering storm, the orc invasion. Shuna narrowed her eyes. You seem awfully cheerful for someone delivering a war warning. Gabiru blinked, then laughed haughtily. Nonsense. I simply believe in showing strength, not fear. Besides, if I join forces with you, the path to victory is assured, yes. Madara folded his arms. That depends on the strength and wisdom of those requesting alliance. Gabiru smirked and pointed at himself. Then allow me to show you what true charisma looks like. From the shadow behind Madara, Ranga's growl rumbled low, and Gabiru instantly shrunk back a step. Rigurd chuckled nervously. Lord Madara, perhaps we should invite them in. Madara considered it. Very well. But I will speak to your father directly in the future if this alliance becomes official. Gabiru's confident grin returned. Of course. For now, treat me as your honored guest. As the group entered the village, Shion leaned close to Madara, whispering, he talks more than Gobta. Impossible, Madara muttered, prompting a giggle from Shuna. From a nearby rooftop, Soe whispered to himself, he's more annoying than dangerous. But I'll keep an eye on him. Gabiru entered the heart of the village blissfully unaware of how outclassed he truly was. Gabiru strutted with overt bravado, leading his entourage through the bustling lanes of the village. His arms were crossed confidently, and his eyes flickered with an air of self-assured superiority as he took in the sights around him. From behind him, the lizardmen warriors flanked him like a well-practiced procession, their scales glimmering under the sun's gaze. As they passed the intricately carved stone walls, Gabiru's attention was momentarily ensnared by the grandeur of their construction. His lips pursed with a mixture of intrigue and indifference, though his stride remained unbroken, every step measured to project dominance. The timber-framed watchtowers overlooked them, sentinels of wood and iron promising vigilance over the territory. Curiosity piqued, Gabiru turned his gaze towards clusters of villagers moving with purposeful swiftness. Their armor caught the daylight, polished surfaces casting reflections like glints on a river's surface. Each inhabitant carried an aura not of meek submission one might expect from goblins but of grace and unexpected elegance borne by those ready for what lay ahead. He whispered sidelong to one of his warriors, observe how they carry themselves. The warrior nodded, concern tempered only by equal parts curiosity about this tribe's unexpected sophistication. A troop of children scampered past, giggling despite their burdens. They balanced tools and materials meant for fortification efforts, their youthful energy infectious. Gabiru's eyes lingered a moment longer on them, unfamiliar sight indeed, where young ones contributed seamlessly to the communal labor. Yet amid these observations born out of necessity, an unease settled within him like silt at riverbed bottoms. This wasn't the picture painted by rumors, a simple goblin settlement cowering before orcish threats. Instead stood a community thriving under a unified purpose few could claim true mastery over. Suddenly aware that he saw neither goblins nor direwolves among them, Gabiru furrowed his brow thoughtfully. His observation stirred memories and tales spun from encounters past, creatures described as far less formidable than those milling industriously around now. He paused mid-stride, at last a dramatic halt intended to punctuate silent contemplation before muttering aloud with a hint of skepticism. So this is the goblin village I've heard rumors about. He muttered aloud, squinting suspiciously at the tall stone walls, timber-framed watchtowers, and busy clusters of well-armored, graceful humanoids. Strange, I don't see a single goblin or direwolf. Are they in hiding? Benimaru, walking beside Madara, narrowed his eyes. These are the goblins. And the direwolves. Gabiru blinked. What? You're telling me these majestic, buff-looking individuals used to be goblins? Rigurd stepped forward, proudly puffing out his chest. Indeed. Lord Madara named us, and through his power, we evolved to what you see now. Gabiru paused. His golden eyes slowly drifted toward Madara, who was currently standing quietly at the center of the group, arms loosely crossed, his aura completely muted. Gabiru scoffed. This guy. You're telling me this man transformed goblins into high-class monsters? He doesn't even look strong. The temperature dropped. Xian instantly reached for her great club, eyes twitching with fury. You arrogant lizard punk, say that again. Ronga's fur bristled with killing intent, his voice low and guttural as he stepped forward. Insult Lord Madara again, and your bones will decorate my den. Gabiru froze for a moment, tail stiff, sweat beading along his brow, but to his credit, or foolishness, he tried to laugh it off. Whoa there. Just saying it's hard to believe, that's all. No need for violence, right? Madara raised a hand calmly. Enough. Both Ranga and Xian immediately obeyed, stepping back, though their glares remained firmly locked on Gabiru. Madara tilted his head slightly, observing Gabiru with an unreadable expression. You want proof? Fine. He turned to Gobta, who had been awkwardly hiding behind Ranga, munching on dried meat until he realized what was happening. Gobta, Madara said. Gobta perked up. Why yes, Lord Madara. This lizard thinks we're weak. Prove him wrong. Xian grinned. Oh, this is going to be good. Gabiru huffed, posturing with arms akimbo. You're sending that shrimp to fight me. You're underestimating the might of the Lizardman warrior clan. Ranga exhaled smoke. You're about to learn why that's a mistake. A small crowd began to gather as the word spread. Goblins, wolves, and even the Kijin paused their tasks to witness the impromptu duel. The makeshift ring was formed in the training yard. Gabiru cracked his knuckles. I'll go easy on you, little goblin. Wouldn't want to make your lord look bad. Gobta bowed sarcastically. How kind of you, your lizardness. Benimaru chuckled under his breath. He doesn't realize what he's in for. Soe merely shook his head. It's always the loud ones. Madara watched in silence as Gobta assumed a surprisingly refined stance, his blade glinting with polish, his body relaxed but coiled like a spring. Gabiru lunged in first, performing a wide spinning kick. Gobta ducked under it with ease, sliding along the dirt before popping up behind him and wham! A clean, spinning roundhouse sent Gabiru crashing into the side of the training yard wall, his tail twitching, legs splayed upward in the air. Silence. Then laughter broke out across the village. Damn, Xian said, stifling a giggle. He really does talk more than Gobta. Ranga grinned proudly. Lord Madara truly trains them well. Gabiru groaned, slowly sitting up, dazed and stunned. I slipped. Madara turned away, already losing interest. Maybe next time, don't insult people when you walk into their home. Gabiru looked up in awe and just a hint of shame as Madara walked past him without even acknowledging the battle. Shuna stepped forward with her usual grace, offering Gabiru a handkerchief. Please compose yourself. There's a meeting soon regarding the orc army. It would be unfortunate if your pride caused you to miss it. Gabiru nodded shakily, rubbing his bruised jaw. All right. As the crowd dispersed, still chuckling, Madara returned to his quiet corner of the village, seating himself beside a fire pit as Ranga curled up nearby. From a shaded corner, Soe whispered to no one in particular, it's always the loud ones. A few hours had passed since the duel. Gabiru, despite the bruises on both his ego and face, had spent the remainder of the visit inspecting the village in an exaggerated show of dignity. He spoke of evaluating potential allies and scouting defensive infrastructure, as if he were a royal emissary instead of a pompous upstart. Still, the warmth and order of the goblin village clearly made an impression. The buildings were uniform, the walls sturdy, and the evolving ecosystem thriving under Madara's quiet direction. The Kijin sparred in the training yard under Hakuro's watchful eye, wolves hauled supplies efficiently, and goblins oversaw construction with surprising discipline. Even Gabiru's personal guards exchanged impressed whispers as they watched Benimaru demonstrate tactical positioning with Ranga and Gobta in a mock drill. Madara, meanwhile, was seated on a wooden bench under the shade of a wide tree, silent and unreadable, yet exuding authority without so much as raising his voice. As the sun dipped lower into the horizon, the envoy prepared to depart. Gobta was finishing a drink when Gabiru's chest puffed out like a proud rooster approached him with dramatic flair. Well then, Gabiru announced with a bow. I thank you for your hospitality, O great Gobta. You rule your people with grace and power. Truly, I now understand the strength of your village. Gobta blinked, halfway through a sip. Huh. Xian nearly dropped the basket she was carrying. Wait, did he just call Gobta the village leader? Soe muttered from the shadows of a nearby tree. Yes. Even Ranga was howling with silent laughter. Madara said nothing, his crimson Rinnegan scanning Gabiru with a mixture of quiet curiosity and faint amusement. He made no effort to correct the lizardman. Gabiru bowed again. I will deliver word of this powerful village to my noble father. Rest assured, you will have our support, Lord Gobta. As Gabiru turned on his heel with triumphant fanfare, his guards quickly trailed after him, leaving a trail of confused glances and muffled snorts of laughter in their wake. Once the envoy was far enough away, Madara finally spoke. Soe. The shadowy Kijin immediately stepped forward. Yes, Lord Madara. Return with them. Observe the state of their forces. Then speak with their leader directly, Gabiru's father. Ask if he would consider an alliance. Be subtle, but firm. Soe nodded. Understood. And, Madara added with the faintest of smirks, feel free to let the old man know his son may need remedial training. Benimaru coughed into his hand to hide his laugh. That's generous. Soe vanished in a whisper of wind, his form disappearing into the trees beyond the gate as the sun dipped lower still, staining the sky in hues of crimson and gold. Deep within the heart of the forest far from the goblin village in the waning sun a trio of figures cloaked in dark mist gathered beneath the gnarled canopy of ancient trees. 3 masked Majin stood in a rough triangle, the red moonlight gleaming off their masks. The one in the middle a slim, smirking figure with a jagged, jesting grin etched into his mask spoke first. Laplace. Hee, looks like that orc lord's finally made his move. All the pieces are in place, To his right, a hulking beast of a man folded his arms with a grunt. Footman. All we need now is for the battlefield to be prepped. Once the chaos begins, we move. Gelmud. Still, that village. It shouldn't have survived the wolves, let alone evolve and thrive. I heard rumors of a new monster leading them. A monster man, called Madara. Laplace giggled. Laplace. Ohaho tilde a new face, huh. Maybe a wildcard. But we'll see how he holds up when the orc lord starts chomping down. Gelmud. He doesn't seem like someone we should underestimate. Footman. If he interferes, we'll crush him. Laplace chuckled, bouncing slightly on his toes. Laplace. Nah, don't be so quick to flatten him. Sometimes it's the unpredictable ones who give us the most fun. Let's just keep watching. If he becomes a problem, well, the boss will handle it. As the fog deepened and the trees swayed with the breeze, their forms blurred blending into the darkness like phantoms, laughing quietly as the wheels of war continued to turn. For nearly 30 minutes, Soe moved with silent grace through the dense labyrinth of the forest canopy, his steps barely a whisper against the rustling leaves. Below, the bombastic Gabiru and his entourage trudged noisily back toward their marshland home, each step a broadcast of pompous grandeur. Soe's position above gave him a bird's-eye view of Gabiru's theatrics, each declaration more absurd than the last. The chatter was incessant, like a drumbeat echoing across the woodland. We shall return as heroes. Gabiru exclaimed, his voice rising above the natural symphony of the forest. Arms raised to the heavens as if he were calling down divine favor, he continued his verbal parade. That man they follow is strong, yes. But clearly the goblin who defeated me is the true master of the village. We shall form an alliance with him first, then take the entire force under our command. His proclamations were grandiose, unrelenting, each word seemed intended to weave an empire from shadows and whispers alone. Soe sighed internally, a small storm cloud forming above his thoughts. This one is an idiot. He couldn't quite fathom how Gabiru managed to consistently climb new heights of delusion, his fantasies stacking upon each other like precarious blocks waiting for an inevitable tumble. Every boast added another layer to Soei's growing impatience, a castle built on sand. The ninja's crimson eyes tracked their progress through interwoven branches and leaves, narrowing with each boastful word that tumbled out, unchecked and unfiltered. He had heard enough. There was only so much nonsense he could endure while maintaining his sanity and stealth. With a practiced ease born from years of discipline and training, Soei decided it was time to disengage from this farcical play. He jumped quietly to a higher branch, gathering himself as he crouched within the shrouded confines of ancient bark and limb. In a single fluid motion, he propelled himself forward, becoming nothing more than a shadow skimming across moonlit leaves, an arrow loosed into the night. The forest blurred past him in streaks of green and brown as he shot through its veins with preternatural speed. Within minutes, he approached the outskirts of the hidden lizardman's stronghold nestled deep in the marsh. Guards noticed him and immediately raised their weapons, but the moment Soei raised a single finger, a pulse of his aura stunned them into compliance. "I am Soei," he said in a calm yet cold tone, "envoy of Lord Madara of the Jura forest. Take me to your chieftain. Now." The lizardmen quickly escorted him through the narrow walkways over dark waters, and soon he stood before the lizardman chieftain, a proud yet aging warrior who greeted him with a respectful nod. "I welcome you, Soei of Jura," the chief began. "We've heard the rumors of a new lord in the forest. Speak your purpose." Soei bowed slightly. "I bring a proposal of alliance. The Orc Lord marches with an army of over 200,000. They consume the dead, growing stronger with every kill. Your swamps will not protect you if you stand alone." The chief's brow furrowed. "We've already sent my son Gabiru to form alliances." Soei's eyes narrowed. Gabiru is enthusiastic, but lacking in perspective. Lord Madara is not a being who sends children to negotiate. A loud-mouthed warrior to the chieftain's right stepped forward. "How dare you speak of Prince Gabiru that way? This Madara sounds like nothing but some upstart." In a flash, Soei appeared in front of him, a blade of shadow at the lizardman's throat. "I could have removed your head 10 times before you finished speaking." "Enough!" the chief roared. "Soei of Jura, your point is made." He gestured, and Soei returned to his original position. The chief took a breath. "We are proud warriors, but even pride must bend to survival. Tell your Lord Madara that we accept his alliance." Soei bowed. "I shall deliver your words. Prepare your best warriors. We will contact you again before the battle begins." Meanwhile, Gabiru's ego reached new heights. As he strutted through the lizardman's stronghold, he proclaimed, "Fear not, my brethren. Soon I will return with an army of elite allies and crush the Orc Lord myself. Then they will call me, Gabiru the Great." His followers cheered, egging on his delusions. But not everyone was impressed. A cloaked figure stood in a dim corridor, listening. It was Laplace, the enigmatic jester of the moderate Harlequin alliance. Behind him, Gelmid, the twisted Majin who served Clayman, stepped forward. Such a dazzling confidence, Gelmid mused with a grin. He could be quite useful. Laplace chuckled. He's got all the qualities of a pawn. Loud. Vain. Easily swayed. Gelmid approached Gabiru that evening with sweet words, praising his bravery and ambition. "Prince Gabiru," he cooed, "you were born to lead, not follow. Why let your father make decisions for you? The Orc Lord is a threat, yes, but with my help, you can defeat him and claim your rightful glory." Gabiru blinked. "Wait. You'll help me defeat the Orc Lord?" Gelmid grinned. "Of course. All I ask is that you take command now. Your father's hesitation will only get your people killed." Gabiru, consumed by ambition, stood tall. "You're right. I'll become the hero this swamp needs. My father. He'll see." As the deal was struck in secret, the seeds of betrayal were sown. Gabiru would march into war, leading his people under false promises, with a puppet master whispering behind the scenes. And so, Soei vanished back toward the village with grim news, while in the shadows, a coup had begun. The damp air of the subterranean lizardman's stronghold felt heavier than usual. Rumors had been swirling for hours now about a grand campaign, about Madara's strength, and about a secret alliance. Inside the command chamber, the chieftain stood hunched over a map, his weathered claws tracing lines of troop movements and anticipated Orc advances. Several elders and tacticians sat nearby, their faces stern with worry. The heavy stone doors slammed open. Gabiru strode in with a parade of armored lizardmen at his back more than usual. His violet hair was slicked back with meticulous care, and his golden armor shimmered even in the dim torchlight. He carried himself like a war hero returning home. Father, Gabiru called out grandly, I've come to relieve you of your burdens. The chieftain turned slowly, tired eyes meeting the arrogant gleam of his sons. Burden. You speak nonsense, Gabiru. This is no time for ceremony. Gabiru smirked, gesturing dramatically with a flourish of his cape. You've grown senile, old man. Hiding in the mud while the rest of the world burns. Orcs are marching 200,000 strong. And what do? Wait for salvation from outsiders. One of the advisors stood, voice sharp. Prince Gabiru, you are out of line. Gabiru snapped his fingers. Detain them. In an instant, the elite guard moved in. A few of the loyalists struggled, but they were swiftly overwhelmed. The chieftain's eyes widened as his own kin were shackled before him. Gabiru, the chieftain growled, have you gone mad? No, father. I've awakened, Gabiru said, stepping forward until they were only a few feet apart. Madara may have terrified my subordinates, but I will prove I am the true leader of the lizardmen. I will defeat the orc lord, take the glory, and protect our people my way. You know not what you do, the chieftain said quietly. I saw the look in Soe's eyes. The man he spoke for Madara is unlike any being we've ever known. If you think, I think, Gabiru cut him off, that you've let fear rule your judgment. If you want to grovel under someone else's heel, that's fine but I will not. I, Gabiru, will lead the lizardmen to glory. The chieftain stepped forward, even in chains. And when you lead them to ruin, will you still speak so proudly? There was a pause, just a second of hesitation in Gabiru's confident facade. But it passed quickly. Take him away, Gabiru said coldly. Put him somewhere safe. Somewhere quiet. The guards dragged the chieftain from the room. The old lizardman didn't struggle. His eyes simply remained fixed on Gabiru, sorrowful and tired. One day, you'll understand what you've done. As the stone doors closed behind him, Gabiru turned to the remaining advisors who hadn't yet spoken. Now then, he said with a winning smile, we prepare for war. Nightfall cast long shadows across the evolving village as the wind whistled low through the trees. Word of the oncoming orc army had reached every corner of the settlement, and despite Madara's calm demeanor, the tension was thick in the air. Lanterns flickered. Monsterkind gathered in small circles, exchanging fearful glances. Some whispered prayers, others gripped makeshift weapons. Madara stood alone beneath a flickering torch at the village's center, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. The ever-present weight of his chakra pressed faintly against the air. Then, one by one, the selected warriors appeared before him. Benimaru, fiery-eyed and standing tall, gave a nod of resolve. Xian arrived next, her beloved greatsword slung casually over one shoulder, her gaze locked on Madara with intense loyalty. Soe emerged from the shadows without a word, his cloak billowing in silence. Hikuro stood straight and composed, his old warrior eyes betraying the excitement of combat to come. Gobta skidded into the meeting spot, panting but grinning. Ranga padded beside him, calm and massive, his bright eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. Madara surveyed them for a long moment before speaking. Tonight, he began, his voice sharp and commanding, we hold the line. He took a step forward, his gaze piercing each of them in turn. There are 200,000 of them. Orcs. Starved, crazed, and devouring everything in their path. Many of our people are frightened. That fear will either cripple them, or force them to rise. But for this mission, only strength rises. He pointed at Gobta and Ranga. You two will work in tandem. I don't care how you do it. Stealth ambushes, hit-and-run rushes, throwing Gobta like a javelin whatever works. Disrupt the enemy's formations. Strike hard, vanish faster. Pull their attention wherever it serves us best. And never separate. Gobta saluted with a grin. Got it, Lord Madara. We'll make it flashy. Ranga rumbled, understood. I will not let my brother fall. Madara then turned to Xian and Hikuro. Your task is carnage. Inflict as much damage as you can. But do not engage in prolonged duels. Avoid clumping near me during the fighting. When I enter the field, I will not be holding back, and I won't stop my attacks to spare allies. Xian smiled with barely restrained glee. Leave the orc guts to me. Hikuro gave a silent bow, hands resting lightly on his sword hilt. Madara shifted to face Benimaru and Soe. You two are the key to this battle. I want traps laid, choke points created, flames unleashed in waves. Benimaru, your dark fire magic can erase scores at once. Use it with discretion but hit hard. Soe, you're the shadow edge, keep our perimeter clear and feed me intel the moment things shift. Benimaru clenched his fist, red aura flickering to life. I'll turn the battlefield into a sea of ash if I must. Soe nodded. I will make sure no threat escapes your grasp. Madara closing his eyes then proclaimed, Kaijin and Shuna shall accompany us as our field medics, but they will remain at the back where it's safest. Kaijin possesses an array of potions, and Shuna is endowed with the gift of healing, ready to tend to any who may suffer injury. Madara stepped back, casting a scrutinizing gaze over the assembled six, each one a pillar of resolve and might in the face of the impending storm. His words carried the gravity of leadership and the unforgiving edge of truth, slicing through the tension like a blade. This isn't about personal accolades or tales of valiant exploits, Madara declared, his voice steely and unyielding. He let the gravity of his words sink into their bones, ensuring they understood the stakes at hand were far greater than any one warrior's pride or dreams. It's about sheer survival, for everyone in this village who depends on us to stand firm. Each warrior met his gaze, feeling the weight of responsibility settle heavily upon their shoulders. Madara's presence was like a storm contained in human form, full of potential energy, restrained yet ready to unleash if provoked. You are the strongest force I can muster right now, he continued, pacing slightly as he spoke, his eyes burning with intensity and resolve. But strength without strategy is just wasted potential. If you find yourselves overwhelmed, do not succumb to the folly of lone heroics, fall back to a nearby squad and regroup. Lean on one another. Silence gripped them momentarily as Madara's counsel echoed within their minds. The flickering torch beside them crackled with life, its flame mirroring the intensity of Madara's promise, a silent vow that none would be left behind in this struggle. Hold them at bay, he said with quiet ferocity, as though speaking directly into each of their hearts. Long enough for me to work my craft. And I swear on all that I have left to give I will sweep this battlefield clean. The torchlight cast dance-like shadows around them. Each flicker seemed to carry subtle messages of hope and warning alike. Madara's eyes narrowed once more, Sharingan flaring briefly in an ominous display before returning to its usual steady vigilance. Prepare yourselves mentally and physically, he commanded, his tone brooking no argument or hesitation. Tonight is not just another battle, it is a stand for your people. The air hung thick with anticipation as they nodded solemnly, each warrior understanding that tonight's fight was unlike any other they had faced. It was not merely a battle against orcs but also against fear and despair. With one last look at his chosen defenders, Madara turned away from the light toward the darkened horizon where war awaited the unknown stretching endlessly ahead. His mind swirled with visions of strategies and countless scenarios as he prepared himself for what lay beyond. There will be no retreat, he murmured softly but firmly under his breath, almost as if speaking directly to destiny itself. Get ready, he added louder for all to hear. This night would mark either their downfall or their finest hour, one final testament to their unwavering resolve amidst chaos. And so they dispersed into the night's embrace. The wet squelch of armored feet in swampy ground echoed across the northern edge of the marshlands. Fog coiled low along the surface like crawling snakes, twisting and parting before the advancing lizardman contingent. Leading them with a theatrical flourish was none other than Gabiru, heir to the lizardman chieftain, a spear resting confidently over one shoulder, his purple scales gleaming from a recent polish. Ha! Look around you, my loyal vanguard. Gabiru announced dramatically, standing atop a jutting tree root like a hero in an epic. This fog is but the curtain to our glorious performance. Let us paint the wetlands in the blood of orcs and carve our names into history. A scattered cheer echoed from his hand-picked soldiers. They were all young, loyal, and nearly as deluded as their leader. Lord Gabiru, perhaps we should slow our advance and await more intelligence, one of the soldiers, a spearman, murmured hesitantly. Nonsense. Gabiru snapped, tossing his wet hair back confidently. The enemy is no more than mindless pigs who slurp in their own filth. They do not strategize, they do not coordinate. They are fodder, and I am the butcher. Another lizard man, a short archer with nervous eyes, tugged at his bowstring. With all due respect, sir, the numbers the dryads spoke of 200,000. Exaggerations. Gabiru scoffed. I shall defeat them with 10 men if need be. Why, even that little goblin with the scar claimed to be a leader of evolved monsters. If he can lead an army, surely one as noble as I can secure victory in mere hours. Just then, a low growl echoed through the swamp. The soldiers stiffened. In the distance, the fog churned unnaturally, dark shapes moving just beyond visual range. There! I see them! Cried one of Gabiru's scouts from a low tree branch. Orcs, at least 50 of them, possibly more, pushing through the reeds. Gabiru grinned, baring his fangs. Perfect. Our prey approaches. Prepare for the opening volley. Archers, fire at my command. The lizardmen quickly fell into formation, though their unease lingered in their twitching tails and glances toward the unseen depths of the swamp. Fire! A cascade of arrows sailed through the mist. Gabiru lifted his spear and with a mighty war cry charged alongside his forward unit. The first clash was decisive. The orcs, bloated and snarling, were scattered by the sudden attack. Several fell to spear thrusts and sword strikes, their thick hides punctured with surprising ease. Gabiru skewered two with a single thrust, twirling the spear for flair before posing proudly. See, I told you. Their flesh is no match for my technique. Another cheer followed as orcs dropped like flies. For a time, it seemed the skirmish was going well. Then the air changed. The fallen orcs' corpses began to emit a strange, writhing energy. The survivors fell back not in retreat, but in eerie coordination, gathering around the corpses. Their mouths opened unnaturally wide, and they began to consume their fallen. The lizardmen froze in horror. They're eating their own, gasped a soldier. No, they're not just eating them, whispered the archer from before, eyes wide. They're getting stronger. Indeed, the wounds on some of the surviving orcs were healing. Their muscles bulged grotesquely. Their movements sharpened. As their bellies filled, their eyes seemed to glow faintly with newfound intelligence or malice. What manner of magic is this? Gabiru muttered, watching the transformation with rapidly diminishing confidence. The now enhanced orcs roared and charged faster, more organized. They began to flank, exploiting the lizardmen's inexperience. Fall back. Reform the line, shouted one of Gabiru's lieutenants, but it was too late. Screams echoed through the swamp as the front line was overwhelmed. Several lizardmen were dragged into the fog, their cries silenced in bursts of blood and snapping bones. Gabiru hesitated. For the first time since stepping foot in the swamp, fear clawed at the edges of his bravado. He raised his spear again, more out of habit than courage. We are not done yet. Circle formation, now. But the soldiers were breaking. Morale crumbled like wet bark. Some turned and fled. Others were struck down mid-order. Gabiru's eyes darted as he watched his once loyal warriors fall one by one, feeding the ever-growing army of orcs with their bodies. What have I done? Another orc charged. Gabiru barely blocked the blow, skidding back through the mud. His arm trembled from the force. We need to retreat now. He screamed, finally casting aside his arrogance. He grabbed a bleeding soldier and pushed him toward the treeline. All forces, disengage. The remainder of his troops scattered, dragging the wounded as best they could. The fog swallowed the battlefield again, thicker now, red-tinted by blood and fire. Behind them, the howls of the empowered orcs echoed like a promise. They would be back. And they would be hungrier than ever. The moon was a pale sliver above the ancient trees of the Jura forest, barely piercing the thick veil of magicules that smothered the swamp below. Faint ripples of energy pulsed through the ground like a heartbeat, the beat of something waking, growing, becoming. Gelmid stood with his arms folded, his long cloak fluttering slightly in the breeze that danced among the trees. His mouth curled into a smirk beneath his masked face. Beside him stood the trio of Majin, a masked man in a crimson overcoat twirling a knife between his fingers, Laplace and two others shrouded in thick cloaks with glowing violet eyes. In the distance, the sounds of battle had faded. The wet slaps of flesh, the screams of prey, and the roaring of monsters had all stilled. The swamp was silent now, save for the occasional squelch as something dragged itself across the soaked earth. "Hoo boy," Laplace muttered, his ever-cheerful tone not hiding the unsettling chill in his voice. The little lizard prince sure gave them a snack, didn't he? Just as planned, Gelmid replied. The more the Orc Lord devours, the closer he comes to evolution. It's inevitable now. He waved a gloved hand, as if dismissing the entire battlefield. Soon, he will become the Orc disaster, and the Jura forest shall be ours. Then, you'll become the true demon lord, Laplace interrupted with a sideways glance. You sure that's smart, mate? That new aura we sensed last week, it wasn't exactly normal, you know. Gelmud's eyes narrowed behind his mask. A minor anomaly. I have taken steps to ensure our Orc Lord will be unstoppable. Let these forest insects squirm a little. It makes victory more satisfying. Suddenly, the air shifted. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath. The trees groaned quietly, the leaves quivering in a breeze that hadn't existed a moment ago. A faint green glow began to gather in the shadows between the trunks. A heartbeat later, she appeared. Out from the heart of the forest, shimmering as though woven from light and bark, Trainee, Dryad of the Jura forest, emerged. Her hair flowed like streams of moss and ivy, eyes glowing with an emerald luminescence. Her presence felt divine, calming, yet suffocating. The masked Majin tensed, and Laplace stopped spinning his dagger. Gelmud's smile twitched. So, the forest sends its little sprite to scold me, Gelmud said with forced amusement. I had hoped we'd meet, Trainee. Have you come to beg? Trainee's bare feet barely made a sound as she stepped into the clearing. The plants around her leaned toward her like children drawn to their mother. You desecrate the ancient harmony of Jura, she said, her voice both soft and unyielding, like the wind through stone. The orcs you have unleashed devour life without balance. You think to create a demon lord by flooding our sacred lands with rotten despair. The cycle must evolve, Gelmud said, gesturing with his arms wide. This forest has remained stagnant for far too long. I bring change. Growth. Power. You bring consumption without creation. Hunger without order, Trainee replied. Her tone was not angry, but disappointed. And now, the balance recoils. The forest does not forget. Laplace whistled low, rocking on his heels. Oi, boss, this ain't just a tree fairy. She's pissed. Let her bark, Gelmud growled, voice low now. She is a relic of a failed age. The time of spirits is over. The time of domination has begun. Trainee raised one hand, elegant fingers glowing with green runes. The entire area pulsed, the trees swaying despite no wind. The sky seemed to darken behind her, stars vanishing from view. I came not to warn you, but to witness your folly, she said. Your orc army shall drown in its own gluttony. The being you call Lord is no ruler, merely a beast drawn to rot. Her glowing eyes landed on Gelmud, and for the first time, he faltered, taking a half step back. You believe yourself a maker of demon lords, she said, now stepping forward, her radiance growing. But you are only a servant to a force you do not understand. A creature has appeared in this land far beyond your comprehension, and you will not survive his wrath. A heavy silence followed her words. Laplace tilted his head. You mean that guy? The one with the creepy purple eyes and soul-slicing aura. Trainee gave no reply, only continued walking forward, the forest itself parting for her like a living tide. The trees groaned with power, roots shifting beneath the earth. Vines crept silently down trunks, wrapping around stones as if preparing to strike. Laplace's casual demeanor dropped for once. Yeah, nah, boss. I say we bounce. I don't fancy being turned into fertilizer by a forest goddess. Gelmud's fists clenched, his pride seething, but even he wasn't foolish enough to provoke a high-ranking spirit inside her own domain, especially one now brimming with visible, ancient power. TCH, he spat. This changes nothing. Our army will still sweep the forest clean. Trainee's glow intensified. The next step would not be words, it would be judgment. Gelmud snapped his fingers, signaling retreat. We're leaving. In a flash of magicules, the masked Majin vanished into the treetops, leaping with swift, weightless motion as the others followed. Laplace gave one last playful salute toward Trainee before disappearing. I liked her. Bit intense, though, his voice echoed as it faded into the dark. Trainee remained still in the clearing, her eyes closed, her hands folded in front of her like a prayer. The forest around her calmed, but the magic lingered, thick and ancient. The balance must be preserved, she whispered to the leaves. And soon, justice shall come, cloaked in crimson eyes. The swamp battlefield was a cacophony of clashing metal, roars, and splashing muck as Gabiru stood proud at the front lines, his shining bronze armor gleaming in the filtered sunlight. Around him, his loyal retainers battled valiantly, cutting down dozens of orcs that surged through the murky waters, their bodies already bloated from feasting on flesh. Gabiru struck a pose atop a slick boulder, spear raised high, his voice booming. Rejoice, my lizardmen. Today marks the glorious victory of Lord Gabiru, the next chieftain of the lizard folk. A cheer went up from his soldiers, though the wariness in their eyes betrayed their true feelings. The orc horde, seemingly endless, kept coming. Each slain orc began to regenerate almost immediately, bloating with devoured biomass, their strength steadily rising. The signs were there. The lizardmen began to tire. Their weapons grew heavier in their hands. Some staggered back with cuts and broken scales. The marsh water had turned red in places. Yet Gabiru continued to grandstand, rallying his soldiers more with bravado than strategy. Then it appeared. A figure emerged from the mass of orcs, towering over the rest. This orc was different. Clad in crude but dark enchanted armor, his eyes were glowing with intelligence and savagery. His flesh pulsed with unstable energy, clearly one of Gelmud's enhanced generals. Gabiru narrowed his eyes, pointing his spear. You there, monster. I am Gabiru, future chieftain and hero of the Jura forest. I shall defeat you in single combat. The orc general said nothing, but his lips curled into a predatory grin. In a blur of motion shocking for his massive size, he was already in front of Gabiru. The clash of spear against cleaver like blade sent shockwaves rippling through the water. Gabiru was faster. His agility was well trained. But the orc general was relentless. Every strike forced Gabiru to give ground. Sparks flew as metal screamed against metal. Gabiru lunged, aiming for the heart, but the orc twisted unnaturally, catching the spear shaft and snapping it like a twig. What? A brutal backhand sent Gabiru crashing into a tree, the wind knocked from his lungs. Blood trickled down his chin. His vision blurred, his pride shaking. The orc general loomed over him, blade raised. Weak. Gabiru shut his eyes. Damn it. Is this really it? Just as the blade descended, a flash of fur and steel collided with the orc general. The sound of clashing fangs and claws split the air. Who? You idiot. What were you thinking charging in like that? Shouted Gobta, leaping in from the side, short sword drawn. Ranga snarled as he clamped his jaws around the orc general's weapon arm, holding it back through sheer brute strength. Gabiru blinked in disbelief. The goblin. And his wolf. Gobta stood between Gabiru and the orc general, blade trembling slightly in his hand, but his expression fierce. Lord Madara sent us to clean up your mess. You really thought this was a one-lizard show? The orc general roared in frustration, but now he was outnumbered. Gabiru, coughing, managed a weak grin. Maybe. I underestimated you. No kidding, Gobta muttered. Now stay down, Prince Dumbass. Let the real warriors work. The tide had shifted, and so began the stench of blood and mud hung thick in the air as the night's gloom was broken by flashes of steel and crimson magic. Gabiru lay unconscious behind them, barely breathing, and Gobta stood protectively in front of him, his small body poised with surprising calm. The battlefield around them was a writhing mass of orcs charging in waves. Ranga snarled beside him, his luminous fur bristling with static energy, the air crackling from the raw force barely held back. The orc general, a hulking brute easily twice Ranga's size, loomed at the head of the charging force, his grotesque maw curling into a sneer. So this is the army of the man they call Madara. The orc general bellowed, raising his cleaver like blade high. A runt and a mutt. Pathetic. Your leader must be a coward to send his pets to die for him. Gobta did not rise to the bait of the general's taunts. Instead, with a fluid motion, he shot forward like a bolt of light through the gloom-broken swamp, his form blurring and vanishing into the thick of battle. The orcs barely had a moment to react before Gobta was upon them, darting between the towering figures with an agility that belied his small stature. His short sword sang as it cut through the air, finding throats and tendons with merciless precision. Each strike was accompanied by the wet thud of falling bodies, their massive frames toppling into the mire with sickening splashes. The orcs roared in frustration, swinging wildly in attempts to catch him, but Gobta was already gone, slipping past grasping hands and murderous blades with an uncanny ease. He spun and leapt, moving like a shadow among them, his blade a mere shimmer that reaped chaos wherever it flashed. The marshland echoed with the clamor of steel against flesh, cries of pain mingling with the hisses of displaced breath from severed throats. Gobta's movements were relentless, a ceaseless dance that left havoc in its wake. 15 orcs fell around him, their lives snuffed out before they had even realized they were under attack. As he landed back beside Ranga, his chest heaved slightly from exertion. Nevertheless, a wry smile crept onto Gobta's face as he glanced at the heap of defeated foes surrounding them. Not bad for warm-up, he muttered under his breath. His aura flickered with determination, this skirmish had only just begun. Ranga growled in agreement beside him, eyes fixed on the enemy lines where tension simmered hotter than ever. The orc warriors who remained watched Gobta warily now, their initial bravado tempered by caution as they eyed the goblin and his powerful companion. Yet from within their ranks emerged a booming laughter deep in mocking that rose above the din of battle. The orc general stood defiant at their forefront, brandishing his enormous cleaver-like blade as though it were a mere toy. Despite Gobta's formidable display, confidence radiated from him unchecked. Fools, he roared over the heads of his diminished troops, voice dripping with derision. All you've done is excite my men. Let's see how your beast fares. He lunged at Ranga, his weapon glowing with a dark red enchantment. Ranga didn't move. His crimson eyes narrowed as the insult echoed in his ears, calling Lord Madara weak. Ranga's respect for Madara bordered on religious devotion. The insult wasn't just against his master, it was sacrilege. A deep growl rumbled from his throat as he stepped forward. You will regret those words. The ground trembled as magicules began to swirl violently around him. Winds twisted into vortexes. Electricity arced between his fangs. Ranga's fur stood up in stiff tufts as an oppressive aura began to spread. The orc general paused mid-strike, unease creeping into his face. Gobta, step back, Ranga said with clear agitation. Gobta obeyed instantly, retreating as the energy reached a fever pitch. With a flash of light, Ranga howled toward the heavens, and the skies themselves seemed to roar back. Death storm. A vortex of crimson fury exploded from Ranga's form, an awe-inspiring spectacle as a tempest of blood-red lightning and razor-sharp winds unfurled into the night. The cyclone raged with unrestrained ferocity, its searing energy illuminating the swamp with a malevolent glow. It was as though the very essence of vengeance had been given form, slicing through the orcish horde with ruthless precision and unsettling grace. Orcs screamed in terror, their cries swallowed by the roar of the storm. Bodies were lifted like leaves caught in a gale, limbs twisted beyond recognition before being dashed against rocks or torn asunder midair. The relentless onslaught left no room for mercy, only disarray as the landscape itself seemed to bend under Ranga's wrathful declaration of power. The ground beneath them sizzled, mud transforming into brittle glass as if scorched by celestial fire. Shockwaves rippled outward, each pulse echoing like a titanic heartbeat from an enraged deity. Waves of force flattened trees and sent debris whirling through the violent wind. Amidst this chaos, the orc general stood paralyzed, disbelief etched across his porcine features as he witnessed the dismantling of his once mighty force. Dozens fell instantaneously, hundreds lay lifeless by storm's end, vanished into fragments or scattered remnants over the battlefield. Silence cloaked them like a shroud when at last calm descended, a stark contrast to moments prior where pandemonium had reigned supreme. The remaining orcs retreated haphazardly, fear now carved deep into their expressions as they gazed upon Ranga's grandeur and grasped futility in their resistance. With eyes ablaze in sinister luminescence and fangs bared like daggers unsheathed, Ranga fixated on the survivors who quivered before him. His growl resonated through stillness, a thunderous reminder that reverberated within their bones. My master's name will not be mocked, he declared with chilling finality. Gobta stepped beside him, his earlier boldness now tempered by awestruck admiration. Together they surveyed what remained, victory solidifying around them amid ruinous devastation wrought by Ranga's ire. Gobta whistled low, shaking his head as he stared at the aftermath. Man, remind me never to let anyone talk about Lord Madara in front of you again. The orc general, bloodied and visibly shaken, growled through his cracked tusks. You monsters. Wrong again, Gobta said with a smirk. We serve the monster. We're just his warm-up act. As the remaining orcs began to scatter in disarray, Ranga and Gobta stood tall at the epicenter of the carnage, awaiting the next wave or the arrival of their allies. Either way, the message had been made clear. Madara's army was not to be underestimated. Xian and Hikuro battle scene. The battlefield churned with chaos, mud, blood, and smoke filling the air as the sounds of steel meeting flesh echoed across the marshlands. At the heart of it stood two figures, both calm and composed despite the mayhem around them. Xian, the towering, violet-haired warrior woman, and Hikuro, the aged yet spry master of the blade. Their presences alone were enough to instill dread in the hearts of the orc horde. In the heart of the tumultuous battlefield, Xian stood as an indomitable force of nature. Her lavender mane flowing like a wild river, she let out a guttural roar that resonated with the chaos around her, a clarion call to destruction. Her enormous greatsword gleamed ominously under the murky sky, its purple gemstone radiating a pulsating energy that mirrored her own fierce spirit. With a mighty heave, she swung the colossal weapon overhead, channeling all her strength into the strike. The earth beneath her quivered in anticipation, and with a thunderous crack that echoed across the marshlands, it split wide open. The ground gaped like a ravenous beast, carving a treacherous fissure across the expanse. Screams filled the air as orcs toppled helplessly into the abyss or were violently hurled skyward by the unrelenting shockwave that followed. Get out of my way, you bloated pigs! Xian's voice boomed over the cacophony of battle as she spun with ferocious grace, her sword carving an arc through the air. The horizontal slash unleashed another devastating shockwave that surged outward in an unstoppable tide. Rows of orcs crumpled before it, flattened like fragile reeds beneath a storm's fury. Even those clad in thick armor found their defenses no match for her raw power, their formidable blades and shields shattered like glass upon contact with Xian's relentless might. Yet her assault was far from over. Unyielding and driven by an inner fire, Xian waded deeper into the horde, each swing of her greatsword laying waste to scores of warriors who dared stand against her. The ground trembled with each step she took, reverberating with both awe and terror, a whirlwind of annihilation. Her presence was a beacon of despair to her enemies, yet one of hope to her allies. As they witnessed her devastating path through enemy ranks, they felt their own spirits invigorated, spurred onward by this living testament to strength and courage amidst overwhelming odds. Just a few dozen meters away from Xian's tempestuous onslaught, Hikuro was a study in contrasts. Where she was an embodiment of raw, unyielding power, he was the epitome of calculated lethality. A specter on the battlefield, Hikuro moved with the finesse of a whisper, his presence a deadly secret carried by the breeze. Each glide of his feet over the muddied terrain was deliberate, pressing toward an inevitable conclusion with chilling precision. He slipped through the chaos unnoticed, a shadow cast by its own volition. Orcs surrounding him remained blissfully unaware until it was far too late. In one fluid motion, Hikuro appeared behind a cluster of 10 orcs as if stepping out from the folds of reality itself. There was a moment, a heartbeat suspended in time before his spectral blade reduced all to silence. Heads parted cleanly from bodies with an artistry so profound that the fountain of blood had not yet sprung into existence. For an instant, they stood in macabre tableau before crumpling like marionettes severed from their strings. Your forms are sloppy, he mused aloud, though addressing no soul there with any trace of mercy. His eyes, fierce and piercing as obsidian arrows, surveyed the fallen with critical disdain. Your footing. Shameful. His words were not merely observations, they were judgments passed by a craftsman to apprentice warriors unworthy of their title. A massive orc brute charged at him with single-minded determination, its colossal arms swinging downward like a hammer seeking to crush stone. Hikuro sidestepped with ghostly grace, bending beneath the blow as though performing an intricate dance against unseen music. Countering with an upward cut executed in perfect harmony with his momentum, he split the orc from its groin to its skull, an effortless parting that rendered both flesh and armored steel meaningless before his indomitable technique. His katana gleamed under the dismal sky, unsullied by gore despite its carnage, for it was more than mere metal. It was an extension of Hikuro himself, wrought from years of discipline and unerring dedication. Around him lay testament to his creed, combat reduced to purest simplicity, a series of completed movements defining life and death by the narrowest margins. Xian laughed as another wave of orcs rushed her. Old man. Save some for me. He glanced back calmly, already cutting down another attacker with a reverse grip slash. Only if you can keep up, girl. Together, the two carved a path of annihilation. Xian's destructive power shook the earth itself, turning the battlefield into a graveyard with each swing. Hikuro moved like a ghost, leaving behind a trail of clean kills with no wasted energy. Between the two of them, hundreds of orcs fell, their forces thinning dramatically as panic began to ripple through the ranks. Let them see what true warriors look like, Hikuro muttered, his blade singing through the air once more. And let them remember our names is the last thing they ever hear. Xian added, her laughter echoing like thunder across the field. The duo advanced, unstoppable in precise beauty and brutality in perfect harmony. Another area of the battlefield. The battlefield trembled beneath the march of thousands. Swarms of orcs surged through the murky terrain, their guttural roars echoing across the open land as their numbers flooded the horizon like a tide of flesh and steel. The air was thick with the scent of blood, wet soil, and tension until a new scent arrived. Smoke, ash, burnt ozone. Atop a jagged cliff overlooking the advancing orc horde stood a crimson-haired warrior. Cloaked in black and red, with flames dancing in his eyes, Benimaru surveyed the chaos with a calm intensity. The wind tousled his spiked hair, and his fingers slowly tightened around the hilt of his katana. Around him, the heat shimmered unnaturally, the aura of pure destruction beginning to take form. He raised his voice, steady and booming across the field with unnatural reach. Do you remember me? He asked. There was no reply, only the continued war cries of orcs too blind to recognize their executioner. A feral smile touched Benimaru's lips. Then allow me to remind you. He raised one hand to the sky, fire instantly coiling up from his palm like a living serpent. The flames twisted and surged, growing hotter, brighter, and wilder with every heartbeat. The temperature across the battlefield began to spike. Orcs faltered, some looking around nervously, others instinctively backing away. And then, with a single motion, Benimaru slammed his hand forward. Hellflame burst. Crimson Lotus Inferno. A cataclysm of searing fire erupted from the precipice as if the heavens themselves had descended to spill their molten wrath upon the earth. Benimaru stood sentinel, an unyielding reaper amidst the inferno he had conjured. The fiery torrent cascaded over the cliff, a draconic blaze of incandescent destruction that surged forth with ferocity unmatched. Like a tsunami of flame, it devoured the land below, sweeping across the battlefield in an expanding sphere of crimson annihilation. Screams pierced the air, a fleeting chorus of agony soon swallowed by the roaring tempest. As the flames licked hungrily at their victims, hundreds of orcs were caught in an infernal embrace, their figures silhouetted momentarily before crumbling to ash. The blaze's passage reduced mighty armor to pools of glowing slag and flesh to mere wisps on the wind within moments. Under this apocalyptic onslaught, the very earth rebelled against its torment. The ground blazed in protest, trees writhed and blackened as if consumed by despair itself, and every pool within the marshes hissed its last breath into steam. Overhead, the firmament shimmered from heat so intense it seemed ready to ignite stars. In this world transformed into a crucible of ruin, Benimaru remained unmoved. His eyes, twin coals burning with a relentless focus, tracked each wave of devastation as it unfurled. Embers swirled around him like sprites caught in a frenzy, fiery phantoms of destruction born from his will alone as they danced through skies now tinged with hellfire. The cacophony was ceaseless, an unbroken symphony composed by conflagration and chaos. Yet within it lay silence for those who once lived, entire squadrons erased without trace beneath storming fire. Where once stood defiant ranks now lay only ghostly impressions in smoke. Amidst this demon's work, however, there lay no malice, only necessity answering violence with greater power, an unspoken vow etched deep in scorched terrain that none would forget. Orc generals rallied desperately amid falling stars of cinder, their voices rising through tumult yet lost beneath diabolical roar, their commands obscured by wrath-given form. As madness unfurled across fields transformed into pyres, soldiers stumbled blindly over one another, a panicked exodus driven by primal instinct as predatory flames pursued them, relentless and uncaring, hungry beasts let loose upon prey too slow or too brave to flee. Orc generals tried to bark orders, but their voices were drowned by the roar of the inferno. Their soldiers collapsing in flames, tripping over each other, only to be swallowed by flames chasing them like hungry beasts too. From a distance, Ranga and Gobta could only watch in awe. Damn, Gobta whispered, shielding his face. Remind me not to get on his bad side. Even the veteran warriors among Madara's army paused at the sheer scope of Benimaru's power. Hikuro narrowed his eyes from a nearby slope, his expression grave with respect. So, this is the strength of a true Kijin commander. When the fire finally began to die, only scorched earth remained. The smell of burnt meat and melted iron drifted through the silence. The once endless orc advance had been reduced to a charred crater, smoking and smoldering in defeat. Benimaru exhaled, letting the last of the heat dissipate from his body. That's one wave, he muttered, his gaze shifting toward the horizon. Now, who's next? And with that, the Crimson Reaper stepped down from the cliff to rejoin the war he was born to lead. Madara enters the fray. The battlefield trembled under the endless charge of orcs, masses of blood-soaked, frenzied monsters that howled with hunger and rage. Yet amidst the chaos, a lone figure walked forward with the calm of a storm not yet unleashed. Madara Uchiha's steps were measured, his crimson eyes sweeping across the battlefield. The carnage was unfolding exactly as he'd planned. Ranga and Gobta had torn through the orcs like death itself. From his distance, Madara could still feel the lingering remnants of that eerie storm of blood and wind. Ranga's technique, Death Storm. Madara's brows arched slightly, the only sign of his surprise. I wasn't aware of that one, he muttered under his breath. That beast still holds secrets. His gaze shifted toward the east flank where a surge of flames bloomed violently across the marsh. Benimaru's black fire had ignited the sky, turning hundreds of orcs to ash with explosive precision. Farther down, the sounds of Xian's massive blades splitting the ground rang out like drums of war. With every swing, she left behind deep fissures and a trail of mangled corpses. Beside her, Hikuro carved through enemies with grace and lethality, his sword flashing faster than most could see. Madara advanced relentlessly through the teeming enemy ranks, each footfall carrying an aura of inexorable menace. The lesser orcs, those unfortunate enough to find themselves in his path, stumbled back, their primitive instincts screaming warnings they barely comprehended. For a moment, time seemed to stretch, a tense hush rippling through their ranks like the calm preceding an inevitable storm. Those driven more by bravado than sense surged forward, their roars cut short by the sheer disdain etched into Madara's every movement. The first orc met an unceremonious end. A mere flick of Madara's wrist sent it hurtling through its companions, an animate missile that collapsed bones like brittle twigs upon impact. Another lunged with reckless valor, meeting the unyielding force of Madara's boot that catapulted it skyward, arcs tracing its helpless flight before it crumpled into the earth far beyond, a puppet severed from strings. Amidst this choreography of brutality, Madara pondered aloud, almost as a soliloquy lost to the winds yet resonating with profound wistfulness. These Kijin. His voice was a serene rumble beneath the cacophony of war. He ducked beneath a clumsy axe swing, a lumbering arc meant for destruction, and replied not with steel but with precision. His hand struck down like divine judgment upon the orc's knee. The joint gave way under his blow, snapping audibly as its owner howled and collapsed. In that solitary beat amid chaos, his mind wandered back to epochs past, the Warring States period, a time when bloodshed and ambition tangled endlessly across landscapes much like this. If I had even one or two of them during those days. His musings held a note of regret mingled with admiration. With such beings at his side, perhaps history would have inked another tale, the Uchiha name might have risen unchallenged above all. Suddenly, the ground erupted nearby in violent upheaval. A cascade of earth and fragmented bodies soared skyward in a grotesque fountain born from Xian's indomitable strength. Her mighty fissure ripped through flesh and soil indiscriminately as if tearing open realms anew. From where he stood amidst chaos now cast in shadow by her devastation's wake, Madara paused, eyes narrowing at the nearness of her fury. His composure remained untouched by surrounding mayhem. Only his gaze betrayed simmering displeasure as he regarded the turmoil she'd wrought mere meters away. Madara's head snapped in her direction, his glare sharp and cutting. Do not strike your allies, he said coldly, knowing full well she would hear him even across the bloodstained terrain. She invisibly flinched from where she stood in the distance, then nodded apologetically before resuming her rampage, this time taking wider arcs. Now at the center of the orc swarm, Madara came to a stop. All around him, the orcs were bottlenecked by the elite squads he had personally positioned. There would be no retreat. No escape. Their fates had already been sealed. Madara exhaled once, letting the air settle. Then, the subtle smile of a predator formed across his lips. It's my turn, he said, voice cold and low, and began to move with purpose into the heart of the enemy. Madara took one slow, calculated breath, letting the chaos of the battlefield melt into silence within his mind. Orcs surrounded him on all sides, their snarling war cries clashing against the symphony of death already playing across the field. Blood painted the marshland crimson, and smoke from Benimaru's inferno still curled high into the sky. But Madara stood resolute, his war fan locked on his back, his eyes glowing with power. He brought his hands up slowly, forming the ram seal. Mokuton. Deep forest emergence. The earth quaked viciously beneath Madara's feet, responding to the call of his chakra with a violence that reverberated through the very bones of the battlefield. The land twisted and groaned, as if the ground itself were a living entity caught in a paroxysm of agony. Beneath his command, the terrain ruptured not with the gentle caress of life-giving plants, but with the fury of a region scorned by countless wars. From the tortured soil, massive wooden tendrils shot forth dark and gnarled, imbued with an uncanny speed and deadly precision that defied natural law. This was Mokuton molded by Madara's unforgiving hand. Unlike Hashirama's gentle forest that sought to restrain and preserve, Madara's creation bore none of its progenitor's benevolence. It was a forest born from wrath and malice, designed to rend and eradicate. The first wave of orcs had no chance to react. They were caught mid-attack, their monstrous howls dying abruptly as they were hoisted into the air on spears of wood. Their bodies dangled like macabre pennants, flesh-tearing and skin-splitting under the force of ascent. Blood cascaded in crimson arcs across the battlefield, painting the already hellish landscape with fresh hues of carnage. From every direction more branches erupted, not content to merely skew. They slashed indiscriminately, rending mail and bone like paper. Panic swept through the ranks as orcs tried vainly to comprehend this new threat that moved with unerring accuracy through their midst. What manner of witchcraft is this? Bellowed one orc in pure terror just before a jagged root burst forth from beneath him, its sharpened point finding his mouth, silencing him permanently in a ghastly eruption of blood and shattered teeth. The ogre warriors stationed along the flanks paused in disbelief at this unfolding spectacle. Even Hikuro, seasoned by countless battles and his sword slick with fresh gore, momentarily narrowed his eyes as he witnessed this transformation upon the fields, an arboreal massacre orchestrated by Madara Uchiha's relentless will. The battlefield began to change beneath Madara's dominating influence, wooden titans rising from mud where only chaos reigned moments before, an unholy forest whose roots drank deeply from rivers of ichor spilled by its own ferocity. The ogre warriors watching from the flanks halted momentarily. Hikuro, his blade still wet with gore, narrowed his eyes as he observed the battlefield begin to change. He's not just thinning them, Hikuro muttered. He's making a statement. From Shuna's position, her wide eyes shimmered in awe. Lord Madara's wood style. It's unlike anything I've ever seen. Benimaru clenched his fist, feeling the reverberations of the jutsu. He's cutting the army's will in half. The wooden tendrils that speared their initial victims were not content to rest, nor were they satisfied with the blood already shed. Those that failed to find a mark writhed and twisted skyward, serpentine figures silhouetted against the murky sky, each one a harbinger of doom, curling like a hydraulic predator in search of fresh prey. The groan of wood echoed ominously across the battlefield, a precursor to the horror yet to unfold, as if the very trees lamented their role in this massacre. Higher and higher they reached, gathering momentum before contorting with an elegance belying their grotesque purpose. Then, without warning, the air itself seemed to split open, a rending noise akin to fabric being violently torn apart, and from these arboreal tentacles emerged a rain of death. Countless needle-like splinters shot forth from their tips, glinting menacingly under the strained light of day. It was as if the heavens themselves had conspired with Madara's will to unleash a wooden tempest upon his foes. The deluge descended upon the orc ranks with merciless precision, each thin needle finding its mark amidst chaos incarnate below. Orcs who had managed to evade the initial surge of branches now found themselves caught in an unrelenting storm, one that pierced fur and flesh without bias. Their screams rose like a dissonant choir struggling against inevitable crescendo, cries for mercy swallowed by shafts of unforgiving wood. In futile displays of self-preservation, some orcs attempted to muster defensive shields raised aloft or hasty formations hastily adopted, but no barrier could withstand this velocity. Needles tore through armor with consummate ease, punctured bone as though it were paper, and delivered swift death deep within their targets. Raucous bellows turned gurgling whimpers as bodies convulsed under volley after volley, each breath closer toward silence eternal. Those who were pinned beneath this dread fusillade became grim monuments to Madara's artistry, corpses staked into blood-soaked earth by sheer volume alone. Others slumped where they stood, their hearts pierced through by multiple projectiles, while eyes went glassy with fear, frozen forevermore. Meanwhile, above it all stood Madara himself, unmoved amidst carnage authored by his own hand, a maestro orchestrating despair from every angle. His expression remained detached from the slaughter unfolding around him, yet within those crimson irises burned power unmatched, a testament born through centuries fraught with warfare both internal and external over lifetimes long since passed into legend. One orc commander cried out in desperation amid this scene, turned macabre, cried, "Stop him! Stop him!" They charged. More than 1,000 orcs redirected from the flanks, stampeding toward Madara in desperate attempt to halt the massacre. But Madara didn't move. The trees continued to grow, forming a brutal forest of carnage. Every inch of land that had once belonged to the orc army now sprouted death. Xian, still holding her weapon, whistled. "I thought my swings caused devastation. He's massacring them." Ranga stood beside Gobta and muttered, "That forest. It's alive. And angry." Madara slowly turned his head as he sensed the shift in the air, a tangible wave of animosity directed solely at him, and it almost amused him. His presence had become the focal point of the enemy's wrath, a testament to the havoc he'd wrought upon their ranks in mere moments. He slowly turned his head, a languid motion that belied the chaos encircling him, as if every movement he made was calculated to convey supreme indifference to the impending threat. He smirked slightly, then, an expression not devoid entirely of sardonic humor as he acknowledged their folly in choosing him as catalyst for fury. "Of course they'd come for me," he mused dryly. Back at the edge of the battlefield, Benimaru muttered, "He's drawing them in. Letting us all rest while they waste themselves." Soe, returning from his last skirmish, stepped up next to Benimaru and folded his arms. "Every strategy he's used so far is terrifyingly precise." Far removed from the fray, deep within the denser thickets of the forest, three figures shrouded in shadow observed the unfolding chaos with keen interest. They were hidden behind the intertwined branches and leaves, which filtered the sun into fragmented shards of light across their faces. Among them stood Clayman's marionette, its eyes glinting malevolently, reflecting both the distant carnage and an insidious ambition. "This wasn't how it was supposed to go," Gelmid spat out through gritted teeth. The frustration in his voice was palpable, each word carrying the weight of thwarted plans and crumbling prospects. His hands unconsciously clenched and unclenched as he watched Madara, a solitary titan of power, dismantle the orc army meant to usher a new era under Demon Lord hierarchy, an era he had hoped to manipulate for his gains. Gelmud's dreams were disintegrating before him like ashes carried away by an unforgiving wind. The violence Madara wielded was monstrous, it tore through Gelmud's machinations with an ease that infuriated him. "That power. It's ruining everything," he hissed. Yet beside him, Laplace leaned nonchalantly against a tree trunk. His posture was deceptively relaxed, but his eyes followed the flow of battle with steely precision beneath a mischievous facade. He chuckled softly to himself, a dark amusement dancing on his lips as if entertained by a private joke only he understood. "Seems to me," Laplace remarked lazily, "that he's even scarier than any intel suggested. We might have underestimated our opponent." Gelmid whirled around to face him, anger barely contained beneath a facade of composure cracking under pressure. "I have to act now." His voice rose, tinged with urgency and fear that threatened to breach every word. "If I don't do something immediately, Clayman, he'll have my head." Without waiting for any further deliberation or counsel from his allies, though allies they might be in name only, Gelmid launched himself forward with reckless abandon. He moved like a comet blazing through darkness, swift, bright, a desperate streak across the sky hurtling towards inevitable collision. His visage bore the harried expression of one teetering on the brink between salvation and doom, a man driven not by courage but by terror's relentless push. The trees above swayed gently in response to his passage, their rustling whispering secrets long forgotten under canopy shades, a symphony accompanying his lone flight toward destiny unknown amidst battlefield's roar. Behind him, Laplace remained motionless save for an amused turn of his head tracking Gelmud's trajectory through breaks in foliage. He leaned closer into shadows that seemed alive around him, encasing him within their depth. With a whisper threaded with bemusement and perhaps pity for Gelmud's plight against forces far beyond mortal comprehension, he murmured softly to himself, or perhaps to unseen ears hidden amongst forest specters, "Looks like the puppet's getting pulled too hard." Clayman remained silent, but his smile widened. Back on the battlefield, Madara opened his eyes as another wave of screams rang out. The wood was still shifting, impaling, needling. Madara exhaled slowly. Only a third gone. HMPH. Let's keep going. He took one step forward and the earth continued to scream beneath his wrath. The battlefield was a sea of chaos, rivers of blood and mountains of orc corpses carpeting the marshlands as the wails of the dying echoed into the twilight. Yet in the heart of the destruction stood Madara, eerily calm, his blood-stained form like a mythic specter of war. After a moment of stillness, he exhaled, raised one hand to grip the gunbai resting on his back, and unfurled it with a swift, thunderous motion. Enough wood, he muttered, his rinnegan shimmering with anticipation. With a flick of his wrist, chakra surged violently through his form. Madara swung the gunbai with a deftness that belied its size, harnessing a tempest of wind chakra so fierce that the very air seemed to howl in protest. The first arc of his weapon unleashed a whirlwind, an elemental maelstrom that tore through the sky with a ferocity rare even on this blood-soaked battlefield. The wind shrieked like living serpents, coiling and uncoiling with savage grace, while the energy within them crackled ominously, hungry for destruction. Within moments, flames erupted along the twisting vortices, searing tongues of fire spiraling into raging infernos. They danced as devils would, swirling with a deadly elegance as they consumed everything in their path. Orcs caught within these fiery tornadoes vanished in flashes of incandescent light, their forms turned to ash before they could utter a final scream. The elemental fury was such that even the distant Kijin warriors paused momentarily, struck by awe at this incarnation of destruction unfurling before them. Madara's gaze was detached, barely acknowledging where he directed his omnipotent wrath. It was a simple motion, a flick of his wrist, almost lazy, and yet it wrought havoc upon an entire ridge swarming with orc soldiers. As his fan cut through the air, those unfortunate enough to stand in its path were incinerated instantly. Armor turned molten in seconds, flesh was vaporized by winds sharp enough to slice bone like paper. The orcs were obliterated so swiftly that cries of agony left their lips as mere whispers lost to ether. From afar, observers could only watch as columns of fire raged across the plain, towering monuments to Madara's fearsome prowess. What once was an army now stood decimated, bodies charred beyond recognition amidst molten metal pools where weapons had melted away uselessly under such radiant heat. As flames began to dwindle down from their terrifying crescendo, Madara's demeanor remained unchanged, a stillness juxtaposing the chaos he caused, and yet it signaled not respite but transition as battle continued unabated. He moved forward, then a blur propelled by sudden infusion of lightning-style chakra coursing through his veins. With effortless finesse he vaulted into air above rows upon rows of stunned adversaries who watched in terrified anticipation. Lightning crackled from his fingertips, each bolt piercing through night like shooting stars, swift and unerring in their judgment. Lances of raw energy lanced downward, striking hard, not merely enough to kill but leaving behind grotesque silhouettes blackened against dying daylight backdrop, charred husks rising steam from scorched remains still smoldering under vengeful sky. As flames died down, Madara blurred forward, now infused with lightning-style chakra. He vaulted into the air, flipping over rows of stunned orcs. Lightning burst from his fingers in lances of raw energy. Each bolt struck with precision, turning targets into charred husks with steam rising from their blackened forms. Benimaru, watching from afar, whistled. He's not even trying, is he? He is, Hikuro replied, eyes narrowing, but only just enough. He fights like the world is a plaything. Soe gave a curt nod. His movements aren't just precise. They're bored. As though he's testing his own arsenal for fun. Ranga growled lowly. Even now, his kill count surpasses ours. The battlefield shifted again. Shion looked up as another firestorm engulfed a distant hill. That one was new. She murmured. Is he just experimenting now? Madara landed gracefully among a new cluster of orcs. With the gunbai still glowing faintly, he swept low and struck the earth, causing a concussive shockwave that flung bodies like leaves in a hurricane. He followed this with a bolt of lightning from the sky, perfectly aimed at a formation trying to regroup. It wasn't long before even the most battle-hardened orcs began to hesitate, trembling at the sight of the blood-drenched warrior dancing through their ranks like a reaper. In the distance, Geldmid finally touched down near Gabiru. The lizard man was bruised, but still conscious, gasping as he stared in horror at the orc lord. Geldmud's boots crushed down on the muddy battlefield, trembling with fury and anxiety as he finally landed before the bruised and battered form of Gabiru, kneeling amidst the wreckage of his proud unit. All around, the orcs wailed in agony, the legacy of Madara's rampage. Gabiru, though battered and breathless, still harbored a fierce glimmer of defiance in his eyes. He looked up at Geldmid with hope rekindled by the demon lord's arrival amidst the storm of chaos surrounding them. Geldmid-sama. You're here at last. He gasped between labored breaths. I believed with all my heart that you'd come for us. I held out faith that our service would be recognized. But Geldmud's response was a derisive scoff, cutting through Gabiru's hopeful words like a blade through cloth. His eyes were merciless as he surveyed the wreckage of once proud warriors now reduced to ruin. Gabiru, he sneered, letting each word drip with icy contempt, you truly are a sight to behold. Pathetic doesn't even begin to describe it. At these words, Gabiru froze, the embers of his spirit faltering under the withering disdain. Did you really think you were something more than an expendable piece on this chessboard? Geldmud's voice was a razor-edged whisper, slicing into Gabiru's fragile bravado. Your only purpose was to serve as a distraction, a mere diversion to soften our enemies for Lord Clayman's grand aspirations. He paused, relishing the crack in Gabiru's confidence before delivering the final blow. You were never meant to survive this gambit. Gabiru's heart wrenched within his chest, his voice cracking under the weight of betrayal. But, I served you faithfully, he choked out, desperation lacing every syllable. Geldmud's expression twisted into one of mockery as he raised his hand, fingers sparking with malevolent energy gathering at his command. His intentions were clear, execution, swift and unmerciful. Then die grateful for your part played in our scheme, worm. The air shimmered ominously around his fingertips. The deadly incantation was on the verge of release when suddenly Gabiru's loyal guards leapt into action. A wall of determination and courage fortified by loyalty interposed itself between their fallen leader and impending doom. They braced themselves against the arcane assault, groans erupting as they absorbed its devastating force. Despite their agony, they stood firm, unwavering in their resolve not to let Gabiru fall alone. Their bodies bore the pain intended for another, an act of sacrifice born from bonds far deeper than any mortal ambitions or demonic machinations. Stunned by their unexpected valor yet unrepentant in rage, Geldmid seethed at their defiance even in suffering. You would protect this fool to your deaths. So be it. Geldmid snarled. Suddenly, a surge of invisible force rippled through the battlefield. Boom. A deafening almighty push cracked the air like thunder, and Geldmud's incoming barrage of energy was shattered in an instant. Dust and magical residue burst outward, revealing Madara, who now stood protectively in front of Gabiru, his Rinnegan shimmering ominously. Geldmid froze. Those eyes, they saw through him. Past him. As if he were less than a fly. Why you're not normal, Geldmid stammered, his body shaking. Geld. Kill him. Do it now. A sudden, guttural roar shook the field. The orc lord Geld shambled forward, his body bulging and bubbling with rapidly growing mass. His eyes were wide with madness and hunger. Magicules began to flood from him in chaotic waves. Madara tilted his head slightly. What is he doing? Geld's eyes gleamed with a feral, primal madness as he lunged forward, an unstoppable force of nature driven by insatiable hunger. His massive hands wrapped around Geldmud's throat in a vice-like grip, fingers digging into flesh with merciless intent. The desperate pleas of the demon lord fell on deaf ears. Wait. I'm your master. I created you. Geldmid choked out, his voice a thin thread of panic. You can't. The reply was not words but a sound, a gruesome symphony of destruction. Crunch. The scream that followed was consumed within the cacophony of tearing flesh and splintering bone, echoing across the battlefield like the dirge of forgotten kings. With each passing moment, Geld's form twisted and cracked grotesquely. It was as if his very being was a vessel for something far more ancient and elemental than any could fathom. His power surged violently, spiking with every agonizing second as though the earth itself trembled beneath his metamorphosis. Runes of ancient hunger, symbols lost to time and known only to nightmares, erupted across his skin, glowing crimson against the pale pallor of his transforming body. Magicals poured into him like an unrestrained torrent from an open floodgate, saturating every fiber of his being with raw, unbounded energy. Nearby warriors, allies and foes alike, stumbled back instinctively from the monstrous spectacle unfolding before them. It was an evolution unlike any they had witnessed, a force that defied their understanding and shook their resolve. But even in chaos, Madara remained unmoved, a monolith amidst the storm. His gaze never wavered from the abomination Geld was becoming, coldly assessing the new threat with calculating eyes that held neither fear nor hesitation. For those who watched from afar, the scene was surreal, a macabre dance between creator and creation now turned on its head. Shuna, observing with widening eyes from her vantage point amidst the flurry of battle, could barely contain her dread as she clutched at her robes with trembling fingers. What is that thing becoming? She whispered breathlessly to herself, a question that lingered like a shadow over the battlefield. A true monster, Hikuro whispered. Once the transformation was complete, Geld, now the orc disaster, stood towering and menacing, surrounded by the corpses of both friend and foe. He roared, "I am hungry." A colossal tidal wave of magic erupted from his maw, forming a brilliant beam of destructive energy that surged across the battlefield. This formidable force obliterated dozens of orcs in its path, leaving behind a deep, smoking trench carved into the earth. The air shimmered with residual magic, and the ground trembled from the sheer power of the blast. Madara didn't flinch. He raised a single hand and absorbed the entire blast with his prey to path. The energy swirled around him, consumed and rendered harmless. Geld's yellow eyes widened. "You ate it." Madara responded with a smirk. "You're not the only one who can consume energy." In a heartbeat, Shien and Benimaru became twin streaks of motion, converging upon the monstrous figure of Geld from opposite flanks. Shien's blade, gleaming with an ethereal shimmer, slashed through the air with a whistle, its edge biting into the dense flesh of the orc disaster's side. The impact was swift, precise, a masterstroke aimed at cleaving weakness into the beast's formidable defense. Simultaneously, Benimaru unleashed his inner inferno. His hand ignited in an eruption of black flames that coiled and danced in his palm like orbs of malice before bursting outward with cataclysmic force. The concentrated detonation struck Geld square in the chest, a fiery blossom against the expanse of his grotesque form. For a brief moment, time seemed to pause as the ferocity of their combined assault painted the sky with light and shadow, a canvas of luminescent battle waged against encroaching darkness. Hope flickered briefly among the ranks watching from afar. Yet reality proved harsh when Geld's towering silhouette re-emerged unyielding amidst the dissipating smoke, a titan undeterred. Stumbling only slightly under their onslaught, he was an embodiment of relentless endurance. A guttural roar erupted from his throat, primal and earth-shaking, a war cry defying his adversary's efforts. Sinews twisted beneath his skin as wounds sealed at an unnatural pace, gashes knitted together. Regeneration was swift and unrelenting, an affront to every blow dealt by Shien and Benimaru. Then came retaliation. A seismic shockwave radiated outward from Geld's core, rippling through the air with tempestuous fury. It consumed all in its path with indiscriminate force as earth trembled and dust rose in swirling clouds. Caught within this brutalizing surge, both Shien and Benimaru were sent hurtling backward against their will, a testament to Geld's overpowering might. They skidded across jagged terrain before finding their footing once more amidst scattered debris. Madara narrowed his eyes. "So, you're more than a puppet after all. Good." He stepped forward, cracking his neck, his cloak fluttering in the blistering air. "Now, let's see if you survive round 2. A profound silence enveloped the battlefield, the acrid scent of smoke, ash, and torn earth hanging heavily in the air as Madara stood defiantly amidst a sea of orcish corpses. The wind tore at his cloak with ferocious intent, his gaze unwavering, focused not on the fallen but on the monstrosity that had clawed its way from the ruins of shattered dreams, Geld, the newly born orc disaster. His muscles bulged grotesquely, Swollen with the power of consumed souls, his aura a violent tempest of insatiable hunger and seething hatred. The battlefield, once a cacophony of clashing steel and spilled blood, now lay eerily still. All eyes from every shadowed corner of the Jura forest fixed on the impending cataclysm, the burgeoning demon lord pitted against the enigmatic force from another realm, a confrontation promising untold devastation. Geld's lips curled back in a snarl, revealing his sharp teeth as his muscles coiled like tightly wound springs, ready to unleash his formidable strength. He lunged forward, his massive form moving with a terrifying speed that seemed impossible for his size. But Madara was quicker. Thwack! In a blink, Madara's figure disappeared from view, only to materialize behind Geld with a devastating palm strike. The impact reverberated through the orc's broad back, sending shockwaves rippling through his flesh. Without missing a beat, Madara executed a spinning kick that connected with Geld's ribs, the force like a hammer against a drum. Seizing the moment, Madara grabbed the orc's thick wrist, yanking him with such brutal force that the arm detached mid-pull. The gruesome sound of tearing flesh was accompanied by a flash of pain across Geld's face. With unyielding precision, Madara drove his knee into Geld's chin, the blow powerful enough to lift the monstrous figure off his feet and send him soaring into the sky. Before Geld could even touch the ground, Madara disappeared once more, moving with the speed and precision of a lightning bolt. In an instant, his fist connected with the orc's face as it descended, the sheer force of the blow creating a deep crater in the earth below. Blood sprayed outward in a gruesome arc, accompanied by the shattering of teeth, which scattered across the jagged rocks like grisly confetti. But to everyone's amazement, Geld moved. His body twisted and battered underwent a miraculous transformation. Flesh squelched as it knitted itself back together, the sound reminiscent of wet fabric being wrenched apart and then fused. Bones, shattered and displaced, cracked audibly as they realigned and merged back into their natural positions. From the raw stump of his shoulder, his left arm slowly regenerated, sinew and muscle weaving together, skin stretching over them like a living tapestry. His yellow eyes, burning with an intense and primitive hunger, locked onto Madara's, like a predator honing in on its prey. Unbelievable, Kaijin muttered from the distant ridge. He's regenerating faster than I've ever seen. He took a barrage from Lord Madara and still stands, Hikuro added, eyes narrowed. This creature is a true disaster. Madara's Sharingan spun slowly, tracking every twitch in the orc disaster's movement. So, you can take a beating, Madara murmured. Good. Let's see how you handle this. He inhaled deeply. Kaiden, majestic destroyer flame. A relentless torrent of searing flame erupted from Madara's mouth, an inferno that rumbled across the battlefield like an enraged dragon unleashed from the depths of its volcanic lair. The heat was blinding, a living wall of fire that advanced with terrifying ferocity, consuming everything in its path. Those who watched from afar could only shield their eyes from the dazzling spectacle as the flames bore down upon Geld's colossal form, threatening to incinerate him to nothing more than ash and memory. The roar of the majestic destroyer flame was deafening, a primal symphony of fury and devastation. It surged forward, licking at the sky, turning it orange and red as if heralding the end of days. Trees that had stood for centuries surrendered to its rage, blackening and collapsing in a shower of embers and sparks. The air itself seemed to tremble under the burden of such raw power, a furnace that bent even light and shadow to its will. Yet, in the heart of this apocalyptic blaze, where one would expect only ruin and death, a movement defied expectation. Every eye strained to see through the billowing curtains of fire and smoke. Is he walking through it? Gobta's voice pierced through the cacophony, a note of disbelief cutting through the tense silence. As if in answer to his incredulity, Geld's figure began to emerge from within the swirling maelstrom of flames, charred but undeterred. His silhouette loomed larger with every step he took, each footfall a testament to his monstrous resilience. Flames clung to him like hungry specters yet found no purchase on his regenerating flesh. Even as his skin bubbled grotesquely under such extreme heat, it mended with astonishing speed, knitting itself back together in defiant mockery of Madara's relentless assault. He roared a sound that vibrated through both earth and air, a declaration not just of survival but of burgeoning wrath. Fire still licked menacingly off his shoulders, a bizarre crown for this demon king reborn anew amid destruction. His eyes blazed with a feral intensity, not even the greatest conflagration could quench his hunger. He has fire resistance, Xian gasped. Even Madara's fire. Madara's eyes narrowed. Interesting. He weaved hand signs with practiced speed. Mokuton. Deep forest emergence. The earth erupted with a vibrant, unstoppable force of life. Massive wooden spears, like ancient guardians awakened from a deep slumber, surged upward with a thunderous crack, piercing through the soil in relentless pursuit of the fleeing orc. Vines, as agile and swift as whips, snapped through the air, latching onto Geld's limbs with a tenacious grip, their verdant tendrils wrapping around him like serpents. Tree roots, thick and gnarled with age, burst forth from the ground, twisting and coiling to ensnare him, holding him captive in their wooden embrace, even if only for a fleeting moment. Geld bellowed, but then, acid poured from his open wounds. The wood hissed and melted. The air filled with the stench of dissolving bark and sizzling flesh. He's countering Mokuton. Benimaru exclaimed. What is this thing? Kaijin stepped forward, mouth agape. He's not just regenerating. He's adapting to Madara's abilities. Unacceptable, Shuna muttered. The battlefield rumbled again. Several orcs followers of Geld broke rank, stumbling toward their lord. No! Rigurd shouted. What are they doing? They're feeding him, Hikuro said grimly. One by one, the orcs threw themselves at Geld's feet. He devoured them without hesitation. Bones cracked. Flesh vanished into his widening maw. Power spiked. Why is Madara letting this happen? Gobta cried. He wants a challenge, Ranga said solemnly. He's always wanted a true fight. A worthy test. Benimaru frowned. But, isn't this dangerous? Madara stood silently as Geld grew taller, his muscles hardening like obsidian stone. The ground quaked beneath him as his strength multiplied. The Uchiha folded his arms, his Rinnegan gleaming with curiosity. Very well, he said quietly. Let's see how high you can climb before I pull you back down. An ominous, thunderous rumble reverberated across the scarred landscape, announcing the ascent of the orc disaster to an even more monstrous form. Empowered and grotesque in his newfound strength, harvested mercilessly from the remnants of his kin, Geld's massive form seemed to quake with barely contained might. With a savage, guttural roar that seemed to come from the depths of hell itself, he thrust his enormous arms forward, fingers splayed like talons eager for destruction. A fierce aura flared around, air above twisted and rippled, contorting under the strain of burgeoning magic. In a heartbeat, the sky split apart as countless orbs of volatile power tore into existence. Not mere dozens but hundreds of these condensed magic bullets materialized, a chaotic hailstorm of raw fury unleashed without aim. The red-hot bolts screamed their dreadful song through the air. Trails of violent heat seared paths across the battlefield with reckless abandon. They careened toward everything and nothing, exploding against trees which splintered and ignited, scorching the already blood-soaked earth and reducing fallen orcs to scorched shadows. The very air seemed alive with electric tension as each detonation filled sky and ground alike with light brighter than any dawn, louder than any thunder. Yet amidst this chaos stood Madara, a silhouette of defiance cloaked in dark resolve. In contrast to Geld's frenzied assault, which spoke only of brute force and chaos, untethered Madara moved with a fluid grace that transcended mortal comprehension. He became a specter amid destruction. Where others would see impenetrable walls of impending death, he saw pathways woven between moments. Madara's movements were not simply evasive, they were art in motion. A flicker here, a flash there, a dance on the edge of calamity itself. His cloak whipped around him like shadows given life, his spiked black hair streaked through torrents of flame and debris, a silent testament to defiance. He weaved seamlessly through the storm as though time itself granted him sanctuary from harm. Each dodge was uncanny, an ethereal choreography set against nature's wrath, bending fate to his will, one pirouette at a time, flipping effortlessly midair as crimson death brushed mere inches from flesh yet found no purchase upon him, spinning elegantly upon heel even as explosions clawed desperately for his being but snatched only echoes where once he stood. Every dodge felt choreographed by the gods. Every step was poetry, mocking chaos with order. Ranga, far behind, muttered breathlessly, he's not even trying. Gobta, mouth hanging open, dropped the goblin he had been dragging to safety. I can't even see his feet. Benimaru narrowed his gaze, the tips of his hair burning slightly from nearby detonation heat. Is he taunting it? And he was. Madara moved with a speed that defied the eye, his figure a blur against the backdrop of chaos. In an instant, he appeared beside the Orc Lord, a figure of composed menace amidst the ruin. There was no fanfare, no heralding shout, just the sudden presence of his overwhelming force. Without hesitation, Madara swung his gun by, its wide surface intercepting a colossal blade cleaving through the air. The Orc's sword, an impossibly large weapon, capable of cleaving through armies, met the fan with an earth-shattering crash. The resulting impact was cataclysmic. Metal cried out in agony as it buckled under the pressure. A sound like a mountain breaking echoed across the battlefield, wood and chakra resonating in a harmonious song of destruction. Uchiha reflection, Madara announced calmly, his voice cutting through the pandemonium like a razored edge. In that moment, Madara's gunbai pulsed with an otherworldly energy. The force rippled outward in concentric waves, reversing the very essence of the Orc's attack. The Orc staggered under this unexpected onslaught. It was as though his own ferocious spirit had turned traitorous and dealt him a savage blow. The ground gave way beneath his feet, torn apart by the violent backlash which carved a trench wider than a riverbed. The titanic Orc was hurled backwards, one arm blown cleanly off in a grotesque spiral through the air, a testament to Madara's lethal precision and power. It landed with a sickening slap against the churned earth, an image both horrifying and mesmerizing. Yet nature mocked such moments of triumph with its own relentless will. Even before the dust could settle, regeneration took hold, a gruesome ballet of sinew and tendon where detached flesh became whole again. Pink fibers wove together at an unnatural pace that defied comprehension, knitting like vines racing towards sunlight in fast forward motion. Madara lowered his fan and blinked, a small smirk twitching at the corner of his mouth. You do have spirit. I'll give you that at least. Undeterred, the Orc roared and charged once more, lifting a massive boulder from the battlefield and throwing it like a missile. Madara didn't budge. With a flick of his wrist, a wind-style gale burst from his position, obliterating the boulder to dust mid-flight. As the dust cloud expanded between them, the Orc charged through the blindness, swinging a newly formed club of hardened magic. Only to be met with nothing. A chill ran down the Orc's spine, then pain. Madara had become a living tempest, a force of nature unleashed upon the battlefield with a fury that was as precise as it was devastating. He moved like a phantom, a blur against the chaos, slipping through the Orc's defenses with an agility that seemed to defy reason. There was no need for preamble or proclamation, his actions spoke with brutal clarity. In an instant, he was behind the monstrous figure, his hand crackling with the raw energy of lightning, a deadly weapon in its own right. With a swift, surgical strike, he punched through the Orc's back, his fingers disappearing into flesh and bone with all the inevitability of a thunderbolt cleaving the sky. The attack came without ceremony, a hole left gaping and smoking as the acrid scent of seared innards polluted the air. The Orc roared in agony, but his pain was an echo swallowed by the chaos surrounding them. Blood frothed at his lips as he staggered, yet before he could even think to counterattack, Madara vanished once more, leaving behind nothing but whispers of movement. In the blink of an eye, Madara reappeared high above. His body twisted midair, heel poised like a hammer of judgment, crashing down upon the Orc's neck with merciless precision. The impact was catastrophic, an earth-shattering crunch that sent shockwaves tearing through the ground like ripples across water. Nearby Orcs were hurled aside like ragdolls caught in a tempest. The giant creature staggered under the assault, struggling to regain his footing amidst such relentless ferocity. For all his size and power, he was little more than an unwieldy behemoth facing an adversary who fought with sharpness honed to perfection. But Madara wasn't done. The combo continued with lethal elegance. One by one, like strokes from an artist painting, destruction holes began appearing throughout the Orc's massive form, each mark meticulously placed by Madara's unerring fist. A thunderous strike to the right thigh, a crater formed that bled profusely, muscles twitched before succumbing to blood loss and shock. A palm thrust delivered with pinpoint accuracy opened a deep cavity in his ribs as though mere flesh were paper under Madara's touch. Breathing turned labored as organs strained within their ruptured cage. Two quick jabs followed, deft blows that pierced both arms cleanly in swift succession, wounds designed not just to maim but to disrupt muscle control entirely. Limbs went slack momentarily as nerves cried out in betrayal of their host's towering willpower. Yet still, despite these debilitating strikes raining down upon him like divine retribution, the Orc disaster refused to surrender. I cannot fail, the Orc gasped, his body still regenerating, steam pouring off every wound. I cannot Be stopped. Madara jumped back and watched. A slight tilt of his head. His eyes narrowed not in irritation, but respect. Still standing, are you? The onlookers behind the battlefield watched in disbelief. Shuna clutched her staff, her voice quiet. It's like watching a man fight a child. Kaijin's face was pale, sweat trailing down his temple. He's tearing that monster apart, and yet, it keeps coming. Even trainee, watching from the tree line where vines kept would-be escapees in check, murmured with awe. That one, that Uchiha, is not of this world. And yet, the orc refused to fall. Madara slowly rolled his shoulder, blood spattering from one of the orc's regrown wounds and hitting the ground beside him. Then let's make this more interesting, he muttered. The Rinnegan in his eyes glowed, deeper than before pulsing, as if sensing Madara's rising thrill. The battlefield had quieted. The screams of orcs, the thunder of collapsing bodies, and the clash of steel had all dimmed to a background hum as Geld, now warped even further by the gluttonous power of consumption, stood hunched amidst a graveyard of corpses, his own kin strewn around him like discarded meat. Veins bulged unnaturally under his pale gray flesh. His once yellow eyes now burned crimson, blood-red beacons of unrelenting hunger. His chest rose and fell rapidly. Not from exhaustion. From fury. From madness. From a power still rising beyond its own limits. Geld's massive frame became a blur of raw power, launching itself with terrifying speed. The ground buckled and cratered beneath him, each step an earthquake intent on reaching Madara before the next breath. Rage burned within those demonic eyes, his very being a tempest of fury. His fist tore through the air, a juggernaut strike aimed with deadly precision at Madara's skull. An attack that promised obliteration. Yet Madara merely sidestepped, his movement languid and unhurried, as if he evaded not a cataclysmic punch but a mere falling leaf, a lazy sway to the right. Frustration fueled Geld's frenzy further. Another strike followed, then another, each blow faster and more forceful than the last. The earth beneath them surrendered to this violence, cracks spider-webbed across its surface from the relentless torque of each missed swing. Still, Madara danced amidst this maelstrom of chaos. Not a single blow found its mark as he slipped past every attack with taunting ease. There was no urgency in his movements, only elegance as he flowed around Geld's strikes. Not once did Madara raise a hand in defense or allow himself to counterattack. It was as though he perceived this frenzied assault as nothing more than an amusing diversion, a storm unwelcome yet somehow entertaining. Is this all? He asked with a bored drawl, his gunbai resting against his shoulder. I've sparred with children more coordinated than this. Geld roared, the veins in his neck pulsing grotesquely. He hurled a downward hammer fist with both arms combined. This one was different. Madara raised the gunbai with a smirk, but the blow connected. A sharp crack of impact rang out as Madara was launched backward, flipping in midair. His boots skid across the earth in a series of skipping impacts before he righted himself and landed gracefully in a crouch. A low, eager chuckle rolled from his throat as he stood. And for the first time, he grinned openly. Well now, he said, brushing a speck of dust off his shoulder, you might just be worth dancing with after all. He stood upright, his chakra finally beginning to shimmer like a heat haze around him. You remind me of him, Hashirama. The name dropped into the air like a stone in a pond. The Kijin looked among each other in confusion. Shion tilted her head. Who's Hashirama? Benimaru frowned. Another one of Madara-sama's people. Kaijin scratched his chin. Was he this strong? Ranga growled lowly. He must have been, if our master smiles like that remembering him. Geld's roar ripped through the battlefield, a piercing, soul-wrenching wail that vibrated through the air like the death shriek of a mortally wounded beast. It was as if his very essence tore free from his body, unleashing a torrent of uncontainable wrath and unbearable agony in one devastating, unearthly cry. His colossal frame convulsed violently, each muscle fiber quaking with an overload of untamed energy. He flung his arms wide open, as if to seize the heavens themselves, his eyes blazing with a hellish light. Desperation twisted his face into a grotesque mask, both terrifying and pitiable in its ferocity. The air around him warped and pulsed as he summoned an unimaginable power, a power steeped in the madness of a cornered beast fighting for its life. Between his splayed fingers, a seething sphere of molten red began to form, swelling rapidly, fueled by his chaotic fury. Reality itself seemed to bend and buckle under the onslaught. The ground groaned beneath the weight of his impending attack. Crimson lightning crackled up Geld's arms, arcing wildly across his body, flinging jagged shadows in all directions. It was a tempest born of sheer emotion, a volatile force teetering on the razor's edge of control. Rifts split the earth at his feet, shuddering under the immense pressure of contained destruction, soil preparing to surrender to the coming cataclysm. This was no mere attack, it was Geld's ultimate gambit, his final, defiant testament wrought from wrath and desperation, a magical nuke forged by indomitable will and unrelenting hatred. The sphere thrummed ominously, expanding and contracting with unstable pulses that promised obliteration if unleashed. Within its furious glow lay the potential for total annihilation, a singularity quivering on the precipice of detonation. In mere moments, this perilous orb swelled to twice its size, flickering erratically as if imbued with a sentient thirst for destruction. Its surface churned like molten lava, barely restrained by fragile threads of control, a sunspot poised for catastrophic eruption. And yet amidst this maelstrom, the chaotic heartbeat of imminent doom, stood Madara. Immovable. He adjusted his stance, leaning heavily on his gunbai as if it were a mere prop for his arrogance. His arms draped leisurely over it, lending him an air of nonchalance. His head tilted slightly to one side, a smirk playing on his lips as he watched with a gleam of mockery in his eyes, clearly relishing the spectacle before him. Go on then, he murmured, smirking. Let's see your grand finale. From behind, Hikuro clenched his jaw. He's provoking it. Shuna paled. That thing, it could kill any of us. And yet their master watched as if observing a sunrise. Geld's primal scream tore through the chaos, the last roar of a beast stripped of hope. Veins coiled beneath his skin as he thrust both arms forward, pouring every shred of will into the glowing orb cradled between his palms. With a guttural cry, he unleashed it, an incandescent comet ripping the air, charged with fury and grief, bearing down on Madara like fate itself. For a heartbeat, the world stilled. Madara stood unmoved, serene as stone, every gaze locked on the fiery missile. Then his cloak snapped open like wings, and in one fluid motion the gunbai slid from shoulder to hand, ancient mastery distilled into a single, effortless arc. A thunderous clang answered the orb's approach as metal met magic. The impact threw up shockwaves that cracked the earth, sent stones spinning, and tremored the air until reality itself seemed to shimmer. In that primal collision of force and skill, Madara did not deflect, he commanded. The sphere shuddered, arrested, then pivoted on his strike. The redirected orb tore away from Madara, hurtling through the air on a new trajectory, faster than thought, more relentless than steel. Geld froze, every muscle locked in disbelief as his own creation came roaring home. His eyes went wide. There was no escape. He crossed his arms, catching it with trembling effort. The weight forced him back, his massive feet digging trenches into the soil as he skidded across the earth. Tremors followed in his wake. Slowly, agonizingly, he began to tilt it upward, trying to lift it over his head before it detonated. Just as the sphere began to rise, time shattered with the explosive sound of glass breaking, as spider web-like cracks erupted in the very fabric of space, forming an ominous 60-meter dome. The world inside it came to a standstill, and within that radius around Madara, the vibrant hues of existence drained away, replaced by a chilling, transparent obsidian void. The ball of energy stopped in the air, glowing just above Geld's head. Birds froze mid-flap. Ash from the previous explosions halted in mid-descent. Even sound seemed to hold its breath. Only one figure moved. Madara. Or rather two red eyes, glowing with the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, pulsing with an intricate six-pointed pattern of swirling black. The Uchiha hovered just behind the orc, surrounded now by a radiant azure-blue Susanoo ribcage that rapidly built upward, a towering humanoid Susanoo wrapping around him. This wasn't the jagged bones he had shown before. This was muscle. Armor. 4 arms glowing with divine violence. Within this suspended moment in time, Madara spoke softly. Let me show you why you never stood a chance against me. He raised all 4 fists and brought them down simultaneously on Geld's back. The moment his fists landed, time resumed. And all of hell came with it. The sphere crackled with energy, still gripped firmly within Geld's desperate grasp, teetering on the brink of destruction. And then, as if the universe exhaled a breath it had been holding, came the detonation, a cataclysmic eruption of red luminance that devoured everything in its path. An inferno of scorching light unfurled with merciless intensity, consuming the battlefield and dragging it into chaos. Trees that had stood for centuries were instantly incinerated, reduced to cinders and memories in the blink of an eye. Boulders, steadfast and unyielding, crumbled to dust under the force of the blast, a testament to nature's fragility before such raw power. The very air transmuted to molten ash, searing heat warping the fabric of reality itself. And at the epicenter of this obliteration stood Madara's Susanoo, a silhouette of divine wrath encased within a blinding storm. For one eternal heartbeat, it seemed impervious, an unyielding bastion against chaos itself. Its massive form loomed majestically amid the raging tempest, an avatar of ancient power wreathed in ethereal blue flame. But then, like a candle snuffed by a sudden breeze, it vanished. The light devoured even that beacon of strength. With a soundless roar, it disappeared into brilliance so absolute that it erased all distinction between shadow and fire. Wind blasted outward in every direction from the point of impact, flattening trees, hurling debris, and forcing even elite warriors to shield their eyes as the aftershock roared across the plains. And amidst it all, Madara stood unharmed, his humanoid Susanoo disintegrating around him, its elegant musculature melting away like wax under a sun, reverting back to the skeletal frame of bone and jagged chakra. The battlefield was silent again. Until. What was that? Gobta, mouth hanging open, still had his blade halfway raised. His knees buckled and he fell to the dirt, not out of fear, but out of awe. Kaijin staggered a step back. Time. He stopped time. You saw that, didn't you? He stopped time. Shuna held a hand to her mouth, shaking. He moved freely while everything else was still. As if the world had obeyed his rhythm, not its own. Xian, ever the bold one, laughed nervously. Ha ha ha, that's our lord for you. Of course he was hiding something broken. Hikuro said nothing, only narrowing his eyes in contemplative silence. Even he, veteran among veterans, had never seen such an ability, not even in legend. Ranga's fur was bristling, his body tense as his nose quivered. His chakra flow didn't vanish, it froze. Even my senses lost track of him until the moment the energy erupted. And Soe, hidden in the shadows of the trees, only offered a rare whisper, unstoppable. The battlefield echoed with nothing but crackling flame and the groans of dying orcs. But none of it mattered. All eyes had turned toward the center of the impact site. And there lay Geld. The orc disaster, now little more than a mutilated husk, his body twisted in a crater where rock had cracked into a star-shaped explosion beneath him. The regeneration had already begun, flesh knitting back together, bones popping into place, but it was slower now. Far slower. Madara remained within the remains of his skeletal Susanoo, arms folded in the eye socket of the giant ribcage. He peered downward with bored scrutiny. The massive warrior's aura was still monstrous, but now it struggled to reform. The shock of the reversed blast had damaged him on a level deeper than physical. Madara exhaled through his nose with visible disappointment. Comparing you to Hashirama was premature. He dispersed the Susanoo with a gentle thought, the bone chakra dissolving around him in whirling fragments of violet energy. Landing softly in the air, he hovered just a foot off the ground, his long hair rippling in the wind. Inside his mindscape, Asura's voice rang with sharp amusement. TCH. You finally admit someone doesn't measure up. About time. Though I admit, his regeneration is disgusting. Indra chimed in coolly, he lives on borrowed time. Much like the rest of this world will, should you grow complacent. Madara ignored them both. Geld slowly dragged himself upright from the pit, limbs trembling but fury glowing behind red, mutated eyes. I will not lose. I have mouths to feed. I will feed them. I must. Madara's gaze narrowed slightly. He didn't smile, but something about his tone softened, ever so slightly. You're still standing. Stubborn. He stepped forward, black cloak billowing. I can respect a warrior who doesn't crawl. Who has something to protect. But. His eyes opened. Twin Rinnegan stared ahead, glowing with rotational rings of endless depth. You don't have any power left in your step. Madara's palm extended with deliberate calmness, as though commanding the very earth to heed his will. Beneath him, the ground responded. Tremors vibrated outward, rippling like water across an otherwise calm pond. Rocks danced in place, jittering alive with the potency of disturbed gravity. Across a broad sweep of land, fractures zigzagged outward, etching chaotic mosaics into the hard earth. The cracks spread like veins fueled by momentum's fury until they spanned nearly a kilometer in breadth. A tempestuous vortex of destruction encircled Geld, an apocalyptic tornado composed not of wind and rain but of soil, screams, and shattered remnants. Then it happened. Geld's enormous frame quivered violently as he was wrenched off his feet, not buoyant but seized by some inexorable might. He thrashed mid-air, his arms a blur of motion against the gravitational maelstrom that had ensnared him. Around him spun chaos incarnate, a cyclone manifesting destiny's wrath, objectified in stone and silence. First, it was the smaller rocks and debris that found their path to Geld, clunking heavily against his body as though drawn by an unseen, magnetic force. Each piece collided with a sound reminiscent of shattering bones, a chilling echo of the chaos that had been unleashed. The jagged fragments of shattered earth and fragmented stone clung stubbornly to his form, an unyielding testament to Madara's command over the very ground beneath him. But it did not stop there. Soon, whole trees, once proud sentinels of the battlefield, were uprooted from their ancient grips on the soil. Their once steadfast roots were torn asunder, screaming in silent protest as their massive trunks spiraled upwards into the turbulent vortex. Like colossal clubs wielded by a vengeful deity, they battered with relentless force against Geld's struggling form. And then came the orcs. These unfortunate souls, caught within the storm's merciless radius, were lifted into the air, their cries swallowed by the escalating cacophony of destruction. Limbs flailed helplessly, their bodies becoming unwilling participants in the avalanche of chaos, their armored forms joining the relentless assault against their beleaguered leader. Geld roared, a sound mingling fury and desperation as he fought against this ever-growing prison of debris and flesh. His muscles bulged with Herculean effort as he strained to free himself from the overwhelming onslaught. His limbs thrashed violently, but each desperate movement only invited more elements to pile upon him with unforgiving intensity. The pull grew stronger still, an inexorable force of nature, magnified by Madara's unyielding will. It intensified with each passing second, transforming into an all-consuming maelstrom designed to bury any defiance beneath its monumental weight. Madara's voice boomed across the battlefield, reverberating through the chaos. Retreat, now! Every monster turned at once. Retreat! Benimaru echoed, eyes wide. Get back! Shion screamed, grabbing Shuna by the arm and pulling her back. Gobta already running. No need to tell me twice. The earth quaked violently under the crushing weight of Madara's power as the elements bent to his silent command even further. The force of the pull intensified dramatically, growing tenfold in strength. It was no longer just a subtle tug, it became a powerful upheaval, tearing massive chunks of earth from their foundations. The ground shook violently as nearby hills were uprooted, their grassy slopes breaking apart and rising into the air. Entire caves, once hidden beneath the surface, were yanked skyward, their rocky ceilings crumbling and scattering debris in all directions. The landscape transformed into a chaotic scene of flying earth and rock, as if the very ground was being unstitched from the world. In the stratosphere, they spiraled upward, forming a swelling sphere that stretched nearly a mile wide. It hovered ominously over the battlefield, a newly forged satellite, bound to its creator's indomitable will. This nascent moon, sculpted by Madara's fearsome might, hung threateningly against the darkening sky's backlit canvas. A testament to devastation. The ground quivered with every new fragment joining the cosmic orb above. Dust whirled in frenzied eddies around collapsing stones as nature itself was ensnared in a symphony of upheaval, orchestrated by Madara's relentless hand. The air thickened with anticipation, a silent oath woven into every jagged breath drawn upon this cursed land. Below, those who witnessed the spectacle could only gape in paralyzed terror at such incomprehensible power, crystallized into stark reality above them. Amidst their cries and gasps of disbelief echoed a chilling understanding. Here was an event beyond mortal comprehension. Here stood the embodiment of legends whispered through generations, now realized before their disbelieving eyes. And at its core lay Geld, ensnared within this astral prison forged from his own ruin. Still alive within those confines, his guttural roar thundered through layers upon layers of earth and debris, a defiant bellow swallowed by darkness yet pulsating with unyielding resolve. The massive construct groaned under its own impossible weight even as it solidified around him, writhing on itself like some grotesque sculpture shaped by violent cosmic whimsy. Yeld's roar reverberated from inside the mass as it solidified around him, twisting and groaning under its own impossible weight. Then silence. And yet, Madara felt something. Inside the newborn sphere, he could still feel it. Yeld. Alive. Undying. Uncrushed. Persistent until the end, Madara murmured, lowering his hand. Madara tilted his head. He's durable. That much is undeniable, he muttered with slight amusement. Durable, but not without limits. He slowly started to hover in the air now, his cloak fluttering behind him, the skeletal remains of his Susanoo dissolved fully. Around him, silence reigned, his allies watching from afar, the terrain cratered and scorched by his previous techniques. Asura spoke in his head, somewhat impressed. Crushed under a meteor and still twitching. This one really doesn't want to die. Indra scoffed. He's already lost. Just absorb his soul clean and simple. Madara shut his eyes briefly, ignoring them both. No. That ruins the challenge, he whispered aloud. If I rip out his soul with the human path, then what exactly did I overcome? I need finality. A perfect destruction that even regeneration cannot crawl back from. He folded his arms as he stopped above the newly formed planetoid. Then a thought struck him. The Gedo statue. The God tree. That day, when he'd become the Ten-Tails Jinchuriki, white-haired, pale-skinned, reborn truth-seeking orbs had manifested behind him effortlessly. Back then, they had floated around him like silent arbiters of death. He hadn't used them in this world, not once. The spiritual fusion of chakra and magicules within him had evolved, changed, refined, but the source remained. He concentrated. He could almost feel the essence of those orbs, dense and absolute, spheres that disintegrated all they touched, matter and energy alike. Their balance of yin and yang was flawless. A spark. A flicker of recollection. He reached for that feeling, what it was like to wield truth in spherical form. Concentrate, Hagoromo's voice gently encouraged from the depths of his mind. They are not merely chakra, they are will, intention made manifest through power that has surpassed the world's balance. I don't need a lecture, Madara muttered aloud, annoyed. I've already figured it out. A swirl of ink-like black energy spun behind his back. And then, two black orbs emerged from thin air, rotating silently. One larger than the other, but both pulsing with ominous power. As they materialized, the very air vibrated in discomfort, reality shivering at their presence. He raised a hand, rotating one with his palm, examining it with clinical amusement. Only two. HMPH. I suppose I'll have to practice with these a bit in the near future. Up above, the meteor still rumbled, and Geld's distorted growls echoed again. Still struggling. Madara mused, flicking his fingers. More rubble rose into the sky, additional corpses, boulders, and splinters of Madara's own broken jutsu answering the Chibaku Tensai's gravitational call. Geld's screams became sharper. He was being crushed further. And then, Madara pressed the two truth seekers together, forcing them into one. The black orb shimmered, then changed, glowing with a deep purple-white core, its outer edges beginning to spin faster than before, a buzz of godlike energy tearing at the atmosphere around it. Everyone watching instinctively stepped back, even Benimaru and Soe tensed, their warrior instincts warning them of annihilation. Madara drew his arm back with deliberate precision, a confident smirk playing on his lips. A shame you won't see it, he declared with a self-satisfied air. But every finale deserves fireworks. With a swift, decisive motion, he launched the orb. It rocketed skyward with incredible speed, disappearing into the vast expanse above. A heartbeat later, the calm was shattered as it collided with the distant, floating satellite, sending ripples through the air. Silence reigned, an unsettling calm that pressed heavily on the senses. The air felt dense, charged with an invisible force that seemed to compress the very bones of those who dared to stand beneath it. And then, without warning, a violent explosion of celestial wrath tore through the stillness. A dazzling sphere of white-purple light burst forth, consuming the sky in its luminescent rage. The brilliance was so intense it momentarily resembled the sun, casting sharp shadows and painting the world in stark contrasts. It was as though a second star had ignited, blazing fiercely in the firmament. The shockwave slammed into the earth, an invisible beast unleashed. Boom! The sky itself seemed to crack as the air thundered with the fury of gods. Trees bowed in submission, their trunks creaking under the force. Dust surged across the landscape like a mythical dragon, its roar shaking the very ground. The sound was not merely heard, it coursed through every bone, surged in every drop of blood, and stole the breath from every lung. Every warrior instinctively crouched low to the ground, arms wrapping around their heads and bodies curling into protective balls. Shuna and Kaijin pressed their palms tightly against their ears, their faces contorted with discomfort. Ranga released a deep, anguished growl, his ears flattening against his head as his tail curled tightly between his legs. Even Xian, normally fearless, whispered, "What kind of man creates something like that?" From above, the remnants of the meteor were gone, not shattered, not dispersed, vaporized. There was no body. No blood. Just silence. Madara descended gracefully to the ground, casually running a hand through his hair with an air of self-satisfaction. I still like that technique. I should name it someday. He glanced upward, a smug smirk playing on his lips. Fireworks suit me. Then. The sound of footsteps. Dozens. Hundreds. Thousands. The remaining orc soldiers, the ones who had battled beyond the reach of the devastating Chibaku Tensei or had somehow escaped its wrath purely by chance, were gradually collapsing to their knees. Their eyes widened, reflecting a mixture of emotions as they absorbed the scene before them. Initially, they knelt in awe, their mouths slightly agape as they marveled at the sheer power that had unfolded. The ground beneath them seemed to hum with the remnants of that immense force. Slowly, awe transformed into fear, creeping into their hearts like a shadow. Their bodies trembled, and their breaths became shallow as the realization of their vulnerability set in. The magnitude of what they had just witnessed left them defenseless and small. Finally, the overwhelming weight of the moment drove them to supplication. Heads bowed, eyes closed, they clasped their hands in a desperate plea, surrendering to the inevitable. It was a gesture of both resignation and hope, a silent prayer for mercy in the face of overwhelming might. They dropped their weapons. They knelt, foreheads pressing into the blood-soaked ground. Their massive frames trembled. Lord Madara, spare us. Please, we were forced. Forgive us. Ranga's ears perked. They're surrendering. Gobta let out a dazed laugh. Of course they are. Did you not see that? I'm ready to surrender and I'm on his side. Benimaru turned to Madara mouth agape, who was now walking calmly toward the crater left by the satellite's eruption. Shuna and Xian followed behind slowly, still stunned. Kaijin exhaled. He destroyed a mountain, in the air. Soe didn't speak, only stared ahead. The battlefield had gone eerily silent. A blackened sky hung over the ruined marshlands as thousands of surviving orcs knelt in reverent awe. Their weapons lay scattered, forgotten among the bodies and blood. The terror that had gripped them mere minutes ago was gone, replaced now with something more powerful. Submission. At the center of their formation stood one figure, noticeably calmer than the rest. He was a mountain of a man, covered in bruises and blood, yet held himself upright with quiet dignity. His massive hand was pressed over his chest as he slowly approached Madara, who stood amidst rubble, smoke rising gently around him. The orc's voice was deep, coarse but resolute. You, who have destroyed our leader, you, who wield power beyond comprehension. He dropped to his knees and pressed his forehead to the earth. Please, do not kill us. Madara remained quiet. I am the one responsible now, the orc continued. If punishment must be given, then give it to me. I will carry the sins of our people upon my back. But do not slaughter them. Many were starving, misled, desperate. We never wished to become monsters. Madara looked down at him, his expression unreadable. I'm not into genocide, he said after a long pause, his tone blunt. I've seen enough of that in my life to last multiple lifetimes. He stepped forward, boots crushing blackened earth beneath him. Then slowly, he extended a hand to the orc. You want to atone? He asked. Then stand. And choose. The massive orc's head lifted, his yellow eyes locking with Madara's ethereal Rinnegan. Join me. Be part of something larger than yourself, Madara said. Help me build a nation where power means protection, not destruction. Or, walk away. Return to the wilds. Disappear into hunger. Despair. Oblivion. A quiet tremble passed through the crowd. The surrounding orcs all stared with held breath. The massive orc didn't hesitate. He reached up and grasped Madara's hand in a firm, two-handed shake, his massive fingers wrapping around Madara's as though seizing salvation itself. Then we are yours. I am yours. The battlefield shook, not from jutsu, but from the thousands behind him dropping their heads in acceptance. Madara nodded once, then raised his free hand into a boar hand seal, summoning the king of hell from the void. The grotesque, mountain-sized mouth burst open behind him with a low rumble. From its depths, it coughed forth a green orb of spiritual energy, which hovered momentarily before breaking apart into a fine, glowing mist. The mist began to rain down gently across the battlefield like falling jade stars. Wherever it touched, life surged. Wounded orcs gasped and sat up. Severed limbs began to regenerate. Lizardmen and orc alike with broken bones stood straighter. Peace. Clarity. Madara turned to leave. Far across the continent, deep in a shadowed citadel lined with velvet drapes and floating candles, a large crystal orb shimmered with the aftermath of Madara's battle. Clayman sat on a twisted throne, legs crossed, fingers tapping the armrest anxiously. His normally smug face was distorted with disbelief. That was supposed to be a newborn demon lord, he hissed. A stepping stone. A puppet, he was meant to be a damn puppet. Beside him, Laplace leaned in with a lazy grin, eyes wide with awe. Phew tilde. You see that light show? Sheet, boss, that was some next level crazy. That ain't no magic I've seen before. Clayman sneered, gripping the crystal's edges tighter. Those techniques, I've never seen anything like them in any grimoire. And what the hell was that eye? Some kind of time manipulation. That isn't possible, no magic should allow for that. Laplace gave a low whistle. Didn't even flinch when he was fighting that thing. That orc disaster didn't stand a chance. A new voice joined them. From the darkness behind the throne, Sivith stepped forward, pale skin glowing faintly, crimson hair framing his face like a bloodied halo. His eyes were half-lidded with calculation, but his brows were furrowed. He stared at the crystal orb for a long, tense moment. I've made a mistake. Clayman glanced back. What? I originally came to speak with you about the rise of a dangerous unknown in the Jura forest, Sivith said, his voice smooth and deliberate. A man, no, a force called Madara Uchiha. I had planned to confront him eventually. Alone after having all of his people killed or enslaved. He clenched a fist behind his back. But I see now, that would have been suicide. Standing before him alone would only lead to my complete annihilation. Laplace's smile faded slightly. He's that scary, huh? Sivith nodded. He's the reason I came to you, Clayman. But I never expected to walk in and find you watching this man decimate a newborn demon lord. Clayman hissed and stood up from his throne. He mocked me. Killed my orc. Dismantled my plans. And now he's building an army out of the survivors. Sivith met his gaze, voice icy. He's growing faster than I anticipated. His influence is spreading, and with power like that, he might just tip the scales of the entire continent. A pause. Then Sivith extended a hand. We join forces, Clayman. We erase him together. Clayman's eyes gleamed with manic energy. Agreed. Madara Uchiha must die. They both turned to the orb, now fading from view. Behind them, Laplace chuckled uneasily and muttered, well damn, now we've got a real monster to play with. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting a warm golden hue over the blood-soaked battlefield. What once was a cacophony of battle cries and magical detonations had faded into a tranquil, wind-blown silence. The victorious army, if such a word could be applied to such overwhelming dominance, marched home. At the forefront of the group strode Madara Uchiha, back straight, arms calmly folded beneath the ragged edges of his battle cloak. Around him, the atmosphere buzzed not with celebration, but with a stunned reverence. The very air felt heavier in his presence, as if reality itself had witnessed his power and now bowed in silent awe. Following closely behind were the Kijin, their expressions a mix of pride and awe. Kaijin walked beside Rigard, quietly conversing about battle losses and supplies. Gobta, however, seemed to have a different agenda. He jogged next to Madara like an overeager child, eyes practically glowing with uncontainable curiosity. Lord Madara. Lord Madara. That thing you did. With the meteors and the kaboom. How did you do that? Madara kept walking, not even sparing him a glance. And what about the time thing? You totally froze that orc guy while he held the bomb. Did you stop time? Rewind it. Oh. Wait, was that a special spell? Or a forbidden skill? Or wait, was it both? Quote. No. No what? Gobta blinked. No to which part? Exactly. Quote. What? The Kijin chuckled softly behind them. Shein smirked, arms behind her head as she sauntered with a satisfied gait. You'll get nothing serious out of Lord Madara, Gobta. Give it a rest. But I have, 97 more questions. 98, muttered Soe, appearing beside them like a silent shadow. You just thought of another. Ah. How do you do that? Quiet, came Madara's low growl, though his tone carried more amusement than annoyance. Kaijin, catching up beside Madara, stroked his beard thoughtfully before asking in a more measured tone. If you won't indulge Gobta, perhaps you'll entertain an old craftsman's curiosity. I've noticed your eyes change. Sometimes red with tomo. Sometimes those rippling rings of lavender. Sometimes both. Do all your techniques stem from those? Madara gave a faint nod, his voice casual and composed. How observant of you. Many of the powers you've seen today are born from my eyes. They are not just normal eyes, but the Sharingan and Rinnegan can unravel the dark mysteries of life itself. Kaijin arched a brow, pressing gently, born, you say. Through pain, loss, evolution. Emotions like hatred, loss, and despair drive my clan's visual prowess, unlocking abilities tailored to the user as both I Abid wielder evolve. Madara glanced upward for a moment. The environment I grew up in was war-torn. The constant warring encouraged growth in the most violent ways. Kaijin nodded respectfully, sensing the weight behind those words. HMPH. Then they're not just gifts. They're scars. Madara didn't confirm nor deny it. He just kept walking. Gobta, of course, took that opportunity to start up again. Wait, so your eyes are like living curses. Did they eat people? Did they have names? Did they evolve? Are they? Madara stopped. Gobta froze mid-sentence. Madara turned slightly, his Rinnegan shimmering ominously in the fading light. Gobta. Why yes. Do you like being launched into the air? Quote. Not particularly, no. Then walk. Silently. Gobta nodded furiously and fell back, joining Ranga at the rear of the group. Geez, I was just curious. Ranga, padding alongside, rumbled a quiet chuckle. You asked enough questions to qualify as an interrogation. The group crested a hill, and in the distance, the newly built village came into view. Smoke curled peacefully from cooking fires, and the watchman atop the gates waved as the war party returned. As they passed through the gates, a few of the goblins rushed to greet them, bowing low and cheering. Shein grinned and flexed her muscles. Soe vanished without a word. Hikuro merely nodded at the returning crowd. Benimaru and Shuna stayed close to Madara, eyes scanning the village for signs of trouble. Everything was at peace. He really did it, Kaijin muttered under his breath. One man stopped a disaster. Shuna looked at him, then at Madara's back as he walked steadily forward toward the center of the village, flanked by adoration and silence. Not a man, she whispered. A legend. The dim interior of the Lizardman throne chamber was awash in a heavy silence, broken only by the slow echo of footsteps. Gabiru stood defiantly at the center, arms folded, chin high. But behind the confidence in his golden eyes was a flicker of doubt. Across from him, seated with a heavy expression carved by weariness and disappointment, was the Lizardman chieftain, his father. Flanking the throne were several surviving elders, all of whom looked down upon Gabiru with an air of judgment and restraint. The situation had gone beyond what anyone had hoped. The damage was done. The chief's voice broke the silence, gruff and low. Gabiru, kneel. The words struck with more force than any blade. Gabiru flinched. For a moment, his pride rebelled. I I don't. But the chief's glare left no room for protest. Slowly, painfully, Gabiru fell to one knee. You disobeyed a direct order. You led our warriors into reckless combat, and nearly doomed us all. Gabiru's eyes burned with frustration, his fists clenched. But I fought for us. I only wanted our people to rise. To be free from fear, to become great. And in that pursuit, the chief interrupted, you aligned with those who manipulated your ambition. You handed our fate to a Mahjong who saw you as nothing more than a pawn. You were nearly the reason we perished. Gabiru lowered his head, trembling. I didn't know. And that ignorance is exactly why you must learn. He raised a trembling hand. The guards didn't move. His voice was heavy with sorrow, but resolute. From this moment forth, I strip you of your title. You are no longer a prince of the lizardmen. You are hereby banished from our lands. Gasps echoed in the chamber. Gabiru's breath caught in his throat. Father, wait. But the chieftain looked away. This is not just for the sake of the tribe, it is for your own sake as well. You must grow beyond this mistake. Become a man worthy of the people who still follow you. Gabiru looked up, eyes wide. You mean? The chief's gaze finally softened as he nodded toward the door. Go. And do not return until you've found the strength to lead, not through pride, but through wisdom. Gabiru wandered slowly through the marshlands just outside the lizardmen's stronghold, his ornate spear dragging behind him in the dirt. His once pristine armor was scuffed, and for the first time in his life, he looked lost. Banished, me, the great Gabiru. He kicked a rock into the murky water. And now I have no one. That's not true, came a voice from behind. Gabiru turned, startled. Standing before him were his loyal companions, the ragtag band that had followed him into battle and back. Despite his disgrace, they stood tall and proud. Why are you all here? One of the lizardmen stepped forward with a confident grin. Because we go where you go. Prince or not. Another nodded. You were foolish, sure, but your heart was in the right place. We believed in that. We still do. Gabiru blinked, caught off guard by the loyalty he never imagined he deserved. You'd really leave the tribe, for me. A female lizardman approached and placed a firm hand on his shoulder. We already did. Gabiru swallowed the lump in his throat, his posture stiffening. You know, you're all idiots. Takes one to lead a bunch of them, someone quipped. The group burst into laughter. Gabiru turned toward the horizon, watching the sun begin its descent beyond the trees. Then let's go, my friends. A new chapter begins. And I, the great Gabiru, will rise again, this time the right way. That's our prince. Someone shouted. We just call you, boss, now, another added. Gabiru grinned. Fine. Then onward, my loyal band of misfits. Destiny awaits. The lizardmen marched off into the fading light, banished but not broken. It had been several days since the destruction of the orc disaster and the fall of the demon lord's ambitions. The village of Jura was slowly settling into a new rhythm, one where the goblins, Kijin, direwolves, and even the remaining orcs all looked to Madara Uchiha with something akin to awe, and something deeper than fear. He sat cross-legged beneath a tree at the center of the village. His gunbai rested across his lap, and his eyes, calm yet pensive, were cast to the horizon. Around him, the sounds of construction and recovery echoed, Kaijin barking orders, Kijin supervising repairs, goblins moving supplies. But none dared disturb Madara. He was thinking. Preparing. In his mind, the voices of Hagoromo, Indra, and Asura stirred faintly. Asura. You don't have to do this all at once, you know. Indra. But he will. He always chooses the path of greatest burden. Hagoromo. He understands what it means, to give names. To give identity. To give purpose. Madara opened his eyes slowly, sighing through his nose. They've waited long enough. As if summoned, Rigurd approached with a bow. My lord Madara, they are assembled. Madara stood and followed him to the newly expanded square open terrain cleared after the battle. There stood Geld, flanked by the surviving 80,000 orcs kneeling and silent like a forest of gray and green flesh. Just behind them stood a contingent of lizardmen, including Gabiru, his sister, and their loyal followers. Madara walked forward slowly, his long dark robes billowing gently with each step. yelled. The towering orc leader stepped forward and dropped to both knees. My lord, I am ready to accept the name and the fate you bestow upon me. I will carry the burden of my kin. Madara nodded, raising one hand and placing two fingers on the orc's forehead. His voice came deep and commanding. From this moment forth, you are Geld. Lead the orcs well. A massive swirl of light burst from the orc's body, his muscles tightening, his form shifting, still orcish, but more refined, more dignified. Cheers echoed from the orc ranks, but Madara silenced them with a raised hand. There will be time for celebration later. Now, listen closely. He turned to the assembled crowd. I name you not for glory or vanity. You receive a name because I see potential in you, because you are now a part of something greater than survival. You are a piece of a new order. He closed his eyes for a moment and exhaled. I do this knowing the toll it takes. And so, it began. For 3 grueling days, Madara sat unmoving, flanked by Kaijin and Hikuro, with Shuna delivering water and food he never touched. Gobta and Rongo watched worriedly while Soe patrolled in silence. Each name was like a candle being lit in a sea of darkness. As he named, the orcs began transforming, bulking up, shedding their savage appearances, their eyes growing clearer. One by one, their identities took shape. Among the lizardmen, Gabiru knelt with uncharacteristic humility. My lord, I ask nothing but acknowledgement. But if you see fit. You are still reckless, Madara muttered, half exhausted. But you stood tall in defeat. I can respect that. Rise, Gabiru. Gabiru's form shifted slightly, a sheen of energy rolling off him. He looked back at his companions who shouted excitedly. Madara went on. He named Gabiru's sister, her trusted guards, the lizardmen who had fought and survived. He gave each a title that marked them as warriors of his new order, not soldiers, but protectors of what they were building. By the time the last orc received a name, Madara was trembling. His chakra had long since begun to fray, his eyes sunken with fatigue, but his will remained ironclad. He rose, intending to say something more. But the world swayed. Xian caught him before he hit the ground. My lord. He's passed out. Shuna gasped, placing a hand to his forehead. Kaijin shook his head. It's no ordinary exhaustion. The sheer energy that must have cost him. Rigurd turned to the now assembled masses. All of you, every single one of you, remember this moment. Remember the man who gave you a name. Who gave you worth. Madara was carried to his chambers where he would remain unconscious for 5 full days, locked in a deep, coma-like recovery. The village stood vigil in his absence, with the Kijin and the newly named leaders maintaining order and awaiting the return of their master. 6 days had passed since Madara named the 80,000 surviving orcs, the lizardmen, and others who had come under his banner. His long recovery ended 2 days ago, and since then he had spoken little, contemplating what it meant to now command not just a village, but a growing nation. Now, under the shade of vast trees at the edge of the marshlands, Madara stood face to face with the chieftain of the lizardmen, a broad-shouldered, battle-scarred warrior whose demeanor radiated wisdom and caution. The old chieftain stepped forward, his head slightly bowed in deference. So, you are the one who named the orcs, the one who tamed disaster. Madara's arms were folded beneath his cloak, the soft white of his hair catching the morning light. His eyes, those strange eyes that shifted hue and depth, regarded the chief with calm finality. I did not tame a disaster, he said. I buried it. And I elevated what remained. The chieftain's eyes narrowed slightly. And yet, you did not kill them all. No, Madara answered. Because not all of them deserved death. Those with the strength to seek redemption, I gave a path forward. There was a long pause between the two leaders, the wind rustling reeds around the marsh. What are you here for, Madara Uchiha? The chieftain finally asked. Is this conquest, or something else? Madara took a slow step forward. I've come to offer alliance, not subjugation. My people, goblins, wolves, Kijin, orcs, lizardmen, are now unified under one goal, to build a new order in this forest. One where strength protects, not dominates. The chieftain raised a scaled brow. And what role do the lizardmen play in this order? The same as anyone else who joins willingly. Autonomy, protection, and purpose. You keep your culture. Your leaders. But when threats rise, we fight together. There was silence again, then the old chieftain let out a long breath. My son Gabiru was reckless, but he saw something in you. And truth be told, so do I. He extended a hand. Then let this be the beginning of a pact, the Jura alliance, forged not by blood, but by survival and vision. Madara grasped his forearm firmly, eyes locking. Then let it be known. As Madara departed the marshlands and re-entered the borders of his village, the first people to meet him were Benimaru, Shion, Shuna, Soe, Hikuro, and Ranga. Benimaru stepped forward, arms crossed. You said, after the Orc Lord fell, we'd be free to go. Madara nodded slowly. I did. There was a moment of silence. Well, forget that, Benimaru said bluntly. We've already decided. Every single one of us. Shion smirked beside him. You're stuck with us now, Lord Madara. Shuna bowed her head gently. You gave us a name. You gave us a second life. We will not forget that. Soe's words were simple, but resolute. I serve the strongest shadow. Hikuro's voice carried the weight of centuries. You remind me of the warlords of old, but with vision far grander. I would see where this path leads. Ranga, tail wagging faintly, stepped forward proudly. You are my pack. Madara raised a brow. He didn't smile, but his silence spoke volumes. Then stay. And we will carve a world no one has ever dreamed of. In the dwarven kingdom of Dwargan, King Gazel Dwargo sat in council, a glass of fine dwarven liquor in his hand. A man named Madara Uchiha has conquered a horde 200,000 strong, and created a multi-race alliance in the Jura forest. One advisor gulped. Sire, shall we send a delegation? Not yet, Gazel murmured. But we will watch. Carefully. In the kingdom of sorcerers, Thalian, Elmesia El Ruth Thalian reviewed magical reports while sipping tea in a sunlit garden. A younger elf girl burst into the room. Empress. You won't believe this. A human with eyes that change color. They say he leads goblins, Kijin, and even orcs. Elmesia's emerald eyes narrowed with interest. So, the forest begins to stir. In the domain of Frey, the winged demon lord let out a long, contemplative hum. An unknown warrior defies logic and order, interesting. I'll need to see him for myself. In Beast Kingdom Urizania, Carrion, the Lion King, snarled with interest. Uchiha Madara, a human name, but a monster's tale. If he ever crosses my border, I'll test his mettle myself.